Okay, this meeting of the May 15th, 2019 meeting of the Oyster River Cooperative School Board will come to order. Can you hear me? Is this on? Is that better? Okay. So the first, between 7 and 7:45, we have a presentation from the architect on the sustainability aspects of the new middle school. After that, we'll just have a brief approval of the agenda and we'll open to public comment. So that's the beginning part of the schedule for today. So, Mr. Lamar, welcome again.
Thanks for having me. I'm just going to attach this stuff. So there's a lot of information here tonight. I'm just going to try to go through it as quickly as I can so it's respectful of everybody's time. But please feel free to just ask questions, or if you see something, just shout it out.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the sustainability of the school, of the middle school, and it's one of the tenets that we're building the new school on. And I know folks out in the community may have heard of Energy Star, the U.S. Green Building Council, which is the leadership in energy and environmental design. The petals you see there on the right is the Living Building Challenge. I don't know if people are familiar with that. There's the New Buildings Institute, the Well Building Institute, Green Globes, CHIPS, which is they used to be the California High Performance Schools, but now it's the collaborative for high performance schools, because now it's nationwide. And then Passive House. And all of these are rating systems, third-party rating systems that we can follow putting the school together. Many times we look at the measures and the strategies from all of these programs to choose which ones best fit the school that we're working on. Tonight's conversation is going to be more about energy consumption than site development, water conservation, indoor air quality, and materials and resources. But we don't want to make the mistake to say that we're not concentrating on all of these things. And every single one of those programs that we just talked about on the slide before, that's their main focus, are these 5 attributes of sustainability. We look at sustainability as really a return on investment. So what you see here is we're going to work very hard to balance the upfront cost of how much are we putting into the school in order to recognize savings over time. Because we believe that a sustainable school is just that. It doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. It sustains itself over 50, 60 years. So with that, any questions about that piece? Because I'll go right into the net zero energy discussion. So one thing we're trying to do is reduce the amount of energy that the school uses every year. So there are numerous definitions of net zero buildings out in the world. You may have heard the term net zero building. The Department of Energy, the U.S. Green Building Council, they all define it as essentially your building is going to generate on site as much energy as it uses from a source. So what that means is, you get delivery charges and so forth. Whatever it takes to get to the building, you're going to generate that much energy. There are other definitions, such as the New Building Institute, the International Living Future Institute. They know the difficulties of dealing with a source, because your source of energy may be a coal-fired electric plant, it may be hydroelectric, it may be nuclear. So they're more interested in what it does on the site. So their definition of a net zero building is that 100% of the building's energy use every year is renewed on the site. So if you use a cup of energy, you're creating a cup of energy, and that's what gets you to net zero. If you create 2 cups of energy, then you're net positive. The other piece of that is the New Building Institute and the International Living Future Institute also would classify a net zero building as having zero combustion on site, so no fossil fuels. And that gets into net carbon, and we'll get into that in a second. Because their definitions and other definitions of net zero have to do with the top one that you see there, which is called net zero site energy, which is the definition we just talked about, which is however much energy we use on this site, we'd like to produce exactly that same amount of energy. Then you may hear source energy, and like we just talked about, you know, if you're using so much oil or so much coal to generate that power to get to your building, you have to offset that as well, and that's extremely difficult to do. Then you may hear terms like net zero energy costs, which means you don't pay anything for electricity or for fuel or for any of your energy, and that also is very difficult. You can imagine when you get your electric bills at home, you're not only paying for the electricity, but you're also paying for delivery charges. So even if you offset the amount of energy coming to the school, you still have to pay that delivery charge, if that makes sense. And then there's net zero emissions, and that again is the idea that if you have fossil fuels on site, or if you're getting it from a source, that you're balancing out and you're trying to get to carbon neutral. Another very difficult thing to do. So for our project, we'd like to define this as net zero site energy. So whatever we produce on site is going to offset what the site consumes every year. And that's the goal. And it is a very aggressive goal, but we can walk through what that means. There are certain milestones. I just wanted to let everybody know that people really started talking about net zero projects in their community as far back as 2002. LEED, which is the U.S. Green Building Council's protocol for sustainability, that started up as a pilot program in 1999, and soon thereafter people were saying, well, why are we shooting for 35% better than code? Why don't we get to net zero? NBI has been tracking this since 2010, specifically net zero buildings. NBI has been tracking building performance in their high performance buildings for 30 years. The International Living Future Institute, same thing, around that same time, 2010, 2011. So what you see here, in short, is that there are many organizations that actually track net zero buildings because they take it seriously. And they want to make sure that when people do say, hey, we have a net zero building, that they actually do have a net zero building. So just to demonstrate how difficult it is, so basically for K-12 schools, which is what we're doing, there's one private K-12 school which has been certified as a net zero building. It's not a public school, and I believe it might be in Connecticut. I don't really know where that one is. And then there's verified. Verified means that they take 3 years of operational costs and they actually prove that you're net zero. There are 0 K-12 private schools and 0 K-12 public schools in the U.S. that have done that. Emerging schools means they're registering with the intent of being net zero. There are actually 2 public schools in New England. They're both in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge has a very aggressive zero energy program in their city, and it's the Martin Luther King School and the King Open School, both in Cambridge. But there are also 5 others, so 4 other private K-12 schools have joined the one up at the top. And what that means is they're continuing, even though the buildings are done, they're continuing to go back into those buildings to try to reduce the loads of the energy that they're using, or they're actually adding renewable energy systems to the site, such as photovoltaics. So it's a challenge, and we're always up for a challenge. So this is what we're talking about. So how we do that is we make sure that the entire team, and that includes the owner and the architects and all of the engineers, consultants, are looking at energy use intensity targets. So the energy use intensity is called an EUI, and you can actually figure out every single building that's out there what their energy use intensity is. And what that means is you take all of the energy, whether it's from oil, propane on site, natural gas on site, electricity on site, you translate all of that to kilobTUs per square foot per year. So you add up all the energy it takes, you divide it by the 12 months, and you divide it by the square foot of the building, and that's going to give you an EUI. What we're targeting is an EUI of 25. And just to let you know how aggressive that is, what you see there is it says that in climate zones 1 through 4, 1 being the most mild, I believe 7 or 8 is the most extreme, like in Alaska, we're in climate zone 5. So the average EUI for a net zero verified school is 22 in climate zones 1 through 4. We're going to use more energy because we use more heat, because we're in climate zone 5. The New Building Institute says that the average emerging net zero school in climates 1 through 4 is actually 35. So, and that's important because we're going to see an example in a few minutes of a school that is pretty much 35 and has no renewable energy on site. Codes and standards, we've talked to the building inspector, we've talked to the town of Durham, and what we're shooting for is all of those standards we talked about at the beginning. We look at all those strategies and measures and we try to employ as many as we can in the building, but we will comply with the International Energy Conservation Code 2018. We believe Durham is either in the process of adopting that or will adopt that by the time the building starts construction. We also pay attention to ASHRAE 90.1. ASHRAE is an organization that essentially has targets for energy use throughout a building. All of those protocols that we talked about earlier use ASHRAE as a benchmark. And then there's the Chapter 7 of ASHRAE 189.1. So the reason why that's important is ASHRAE 189.1 is a green building code, although it's not a code, it's a standard, I should say standard. But Chapter 7 deals with return on investment. So in other words, ASHRAE is basically saying best practices is you should put in any new building renewable energy systems that pay for themselves in 10 years. So they understand that if something's going to pay for itself in 20 or 30 years, you know, maybe it doesn't get employed into the project. But if it's going to pay for itself 10 years, you should go ahead and do that. And all of these things will be put together in what's called an owner's project requirements. So when we get together with everybody at the building committee level, we're going to talk about what do we want to do, what are our targets. And we're suggesting that one target be that EUI of 25. Just as an example, for the collaboration across the disciplines, if we were putting in a standard hot water heater in the building for domestic hot water, and it took 9 million BTUs per year to operate that hot water system, we would take a look at how do we define that in terms of net zero, well, we want to deal with it at the site. Are we using fossil fuels or not? So what that means is the hot water heater electric or natural gas, propane, so forth, and you'll see in a minute why that matters. We would do a life cycle cost analysis to find out the best piece of equipment to heat that water. We'd look at thermal storage and how we can use that in multiple ways throughout the building. Then what are your expectations for that domestic hot water? Can we use a solar hot water array, which is something we employ on many of our projects? What that does is it uses the sun to pre-treat the water before it goes through your hot water system. And then there are solar arrays, which are, the PV stands for photovoltaics. That's taking sunlight and basically turning it into electricity. So if you had an electric hot water heater. So again, this is an example using 9 million BTUs of heat annually for the domestic hot water. And the reason why that's important is because if you did an electric heat pump to heat that hot water, you would be buying 3 million BTUs of electricity, which would actually generate 9 million BTUs of energy, because the heat pumps are so efficient. They're 300%, I should say, of the energy that you're buying, as opposed to something like natural gas. If we were using a boiler with a fuel fire that has a factor of 0.9 instead of a 3, you'd be buying 10 million BTUs in order to get 9 million BTUs of energy. So how that calculates out is if we were looking at doing solar panels, to offset the energy for just this one piece of equipment, we would be using 3 million BTUs, or trying to get to 3 million BTUs, so the required photovoltaic array, solar panels, would equal that same 3 million BTUs. Because from the 3 million BTUs, we're generating the 9 million. The second option is if we had natural gas, which you have here on site right now. If we were doing that and we're trying to get the 9 million BTUs, we're not generating 3 million BTUs, we have to generate 10 million BTUs, which means your photovoltaic array is more than 3 times the size of what we would need to offset the electricity. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it's basically saying that, you know, the easiest way, if you want to call it easy, to get to a net zero building is have an all-electric building. And the New Building Institute recognizes that, and so does the Living Institute, which is why they say no fossil fuels on site. But that has a big money impact. For anybody in the community, you know you pay a lot less for natural gas than you pay for electricity. So that's why getting to net zero money is a whole different story. So how we do this is we leverage energy modeling throughout the entire process. In fact, we're doing energy models right now, and we really have just a concept design in terms of the building. But what we're trying to do is find out if the building is shaped and oriented on the site as properly as it can be, to harvest as much daylighting as we can, because the goal here is to use this energy model to drive down the energy use in the building before we even talk about what kind of systems are we going to have to actually provide the energy for the building. Considerations of size. So this is just a very quick analysis of the site that we did. If our building is roughly 145,000 square feet and we're shooting for an EUI of 25, all of this calculation essentially means that if we did an all-electric building, we would need roughly 60,000 square feet of photovoltaics on site. So if you look at the site plan like we have right now, which we'll look at in a minute, we can look at it right now. Between the roof of the building, the parking lot, so there's 2 pink areas up at the top of that slide that say parking. If we were to put a canopy of solar panels above that parking, and we had solar panels on the roof, we would have roughly 80,000 square feet of surface area to put in the solar panels that we're talking about. You would need at least 60 to get to where we need to go if we had an all-electric building. If we have a combination of electricity and fossil fuels, like we showed in a few slides ago, if you're using natural gas, you need a lot more solar panels to offset that amount of energy. So moving on, there are incentives. New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission does give what they call renewable energy credits, and they give those credits for customers such as yourself who put in photovoltaics and geothermal systems. So there is some benefit to doing renewable energies. It's not a big deal, but there is money available. You have to apply for it, you have to get selected for it, and we will be doing that. The other thing that we're doing in terms of strategies and measures is we've already talked about making the building as compact as we can, which actually works very well with the program that we have for the middle school, which is team teaching. We've talked about a 4-story building. So what we're doing is we're getting the maximum amount of space with the least amount of exterior envelope. So a square is typically your most efficient shape. And the exterior envelope is the most expensive system to put on a building because that's where all your wall insulation is and your glass, your insulated glass. And so by reducing that, you have obviously less loss, energy loss through the walls, and it also has a roof over it, so we're actually trying to condense the roof as well. And some of those things, just to quickly go through, what we try to do is strategically use windows to walls. Excuse me. The wall of a building, if you insulate it properly, is your best insulation. And that's where your biggest bang for your buck is to properly insulate a building. So we try to only use 25%, 30% at the absolute max, of glass on a building. That 25 to 30%, if strategically used, number one, in a school, makes it very welcoming, but it also takes advantage of enough daylight harvesting so we get daylight into as many spaces as we can, which allows us to shut the lights off. Knowing that we're going to most likely use all LED lights in this building, the energy use for the lights is a lot less than it used to be when we were using T8s and T5s and things like that. So our goal is to try to get daylighting into 90% of regularly occupied spaces. So what that means is the classrooms. We're looking at double pane and triple pane fiberglass windows, and that gets us an R value of between 7 and 10. Cornair is a curtain wall and storefront manufacturer that makes ultra-thermal frames, which has an R value of just over 4, which is actually a lot better than normal frames. And so that's what we'd be looking at. On the roof, again, the roof and the walls are the most important thing. So we put down a base of 6 inches of insulation, and then anything that tapers up from there is more. So we're looking for an average of R40 across the entire roof, or R45, I should say. The exterior walls, even though they're metal studs like you see in commercial construction, we look to use 4 inches of polyiso on the outside of the wall and 3 inches of foam in the cavities to get to a minimum R36. These numbers that you see here are basically prescriptive measures put out by the New Building Institute, who've been analyzing buildings for 30 years. Some of these numbers are a little bit more than what they would recommend as a minimum. And we also couple this with Passive House, who is, one of their big things is insulation. And so we take a look at what Passive House would recommend as well. We would then have 4 inches of continuous insulation under the slab. So the earth is roughly 50 degrees, if you use that as a rule of thumb, so it's always sucking energy out of your building through the slab of a building. So we actually put 4 inches of insulation below that slab. And then we use 2 inches of thermal break around the perimeter of the building so that you don't get heat loss around that slab at the perimeter of the building. And then buildings are only as good as you operate them and as good as they're set up. So we recommend commissioning. Traditional commissioning takes place during construction. We recommend to get the commissioning agent on board during design, so they're actually looking at the systems that we're designing so they can talk about maintenance and operation and the controls of those systems. And then once you're in the building and everything's calibrated and running great, we would recommend that they come back a year after operation, take a look at everything that's doing, go back and make all the adjustments. And this has proven to be money worth its, or I should say, worth its weight in gold when they come back, because what happens is you hand the building over and there's a learning curve for the maintenance staff. We do all the training for them, but at the same time having them come in and see how this building is being used. In other words, what are the teachers doing, what are the staff doing, what are the kids doing in the building? Commissioning agents can actually readjust and calibrate the equipment differently based on the actual usage that's going on. So it gives people a year basically to flush out the building. So just some quick tidbits of information. We've analyzed your existing school. We've taken a look at all of the money that you spent in 2018, and we took a look at all the energy use that you used in 2018. So you're operating right now at an EUI of 50.22. So that 50.22 though is a little skewed, and the reason it's skewed is you don't have central air conditioning in the building, and you don't have code compliant outdoor air ventilation. So there is some ventilation obviously in the school, and the windows are operable. I suspect they don't open in the wintertime though. And so between the ventilation and the air conditioning, you're able to recognize some savings over what a new building would provide. And the other thing that you have going for you is natural gas. So you're paying for natural gas instead of electricity, and the natural gas is your primary source of energy. Even though you have electricity in the building, most energy you're buying is through natural gas because it's a heating dominant building. And so you're only paying 90 cents per square foot right now. if we factored in what we believe it would cost you if you had a central air system and if you actually were ventilating the school to be code compliant, you'd be around $1.15 per square foot. We checked all this with Jim, by the way. He gave us all this information. So then predicting the new school, if we were targeting an EUI of 25 and we were able to get the renewable energy credits that we're talking about, you'd be able to pay 94 cents per square foot instead of $1.15 per square foot. So what that means is that if we added a minimum of 40,000 square feet, so our new building is going to be about 40,000 square feet larger than your existing building. We know that if we did an addition renovation, it wouldn't be 40,000 square feet. It'd probably be more like 50 or 60 because of the inefficiencies of the existing building. But I just wanted to say if we added 40, over the next 20 years, it would cost you $3.4 million to operate the building. And the new school over 20 years will cost you around $2.7 million. So there is some savings there, although it's not a lot because you pay a lot more for electricity than you do natural gas. And our recommendation would be if you do have fossil fuels, they're on site for backup, not for your primary source of energy. And this is Energy Star. The Department of Energy has a program called Energy Star Rating. And if you plug in all of the numbers, for instance, your electric bills and your gas bills and things like that, it'll spit out what your EUI is. And when Jim did this, it came out as a 51. So we think, when we crunched our numbers, we think you're doing a little bit better, but this is just a boilerplate thing on the Energy Star website. So just as an example, this is Wells High School that we did a few years ago. Wells High School is in the same climate zone 5. It's actually not that far from here, Wells, Maine. And that building was designed, it was the first Maine advanced building for a public school in Maine. This was designed to have a geothermal system and a photovoltaic system, but neither one of them were installed. So what they have here is just a well-insulated, well-ventilated, all those things that I just talked about, without any geothermal system and without any solar panels. And the New England Energy Efficiency Partnership highlighted this school with 2 other Massachusetts schools as the 3 exemplar schools last year because this is operating with an EUI of 37. So, and again, they also have operable windows, but they're pretty diligent in how they operate the building. It was commissioned. So this is just an example that if you do the building even without renewable energy systems, you can do, if you do it right, it can still operate as a very energy efficient building. Strategies and measures, we believe that the building is a holistic approach. So every time we have daylighting, we have less insulation in the walls, but the daylighting actually enhances the educational environment exponentially, but it also reduces the use for artificial lights. If we have heating and cooling within the building, again, educationally, it makes a world of difference. And it also keeps a very healthy building. You'll notice that the International Well Institute was one of the programs that we talk about because it's very important that as we're doing this, we're creating a building that supports wellness for all the students and for all the users of the building. So we talked a little bit about putting solar panels above parking lots. This is a high school in Massachusetts, and you see there in the background, the parking lot is covered with solar panels on stilts, if you will, columns. This is what it looks like up close. So you can see that you just basically put this over all the parking areas. The one thing that it does is it covers up all your asphalt. So you don't have as much of a heat island effect, although the solar panels are black, so they still give off heat. And this is another one, this is at UMass, and in this one you can see that the solar panels are pretty far away from each other. But at UMass, they're very close to one another. The ground's all wet because the pavement pitches in that direction. So when the uncovered portion of the parking lot, all the water runs across it. But what we were talking about was being able to park the buses, school buses, underneath a canopy like this so that you don't have to pay for all the snow removal and such. The inverters for all of this are right out on the columns that support this. It's an educational opportunity for all the students in the community to see how all these things work, how much energy they're generating. We also talked about future readying the building by putting in electric charging stations in the parking lot, and especially in the bus parking lot, in the event that the school ends up with electric buses 10 years from now or more. And then this is what solar panels look like up on a roof. They're all connected. We do leave a little bit of space between each one so we can still walk around on the roof. And there are power purchase agreements that enable you to look at funding a different way to get these solar panels up on the roof. And then, the geothermal system has been a topic of discussion since we started. And there are really two types of systems. And I just wanted to let everybody know, we're suggesting a closed loop system, which means we're not dependent on groundwater, we're not touching the groundwater, we don't care if there's groundwater in the rock or how deep it is. What we really want to do is use the earth itself as a heat sink. And so basically we just talked about the earth being 50 degrees. So what we want to do is run water and refrigerant through loops that go into the ground and come back out of the ground, and all it is just water circulating through the earth, and what that's doing is that's actually heating and cooling your building. So there's nothing to do with groundwater. This is basically what it looks like for a traditional building. They're called boreholes. In fact, they don't even call them wells anymore because it's so confusing. When people think of a well, they think water. So they're called boreholes. The nice thing is you got a lot of rock out there, and the best site to have boreholes on is ledge, is rock. Typically they're about 450 feet deep, so the loop would go down 450 feet and then come back up. This is a project right now that I'm working on that they just completed the well field. There's 112 wells on this particular project, and that's essentially what you would have, and we're thinking about putting these underneath your parking lot. So they drill the borehole 450 feet deep. There are two black polyethylene pipes coming out of those boreholes, one's supply and one's return. It's like one big loop. There it is in the other direction. Then what you do is connect all the wells together, right? So you have this horizontal piping that goes across. So you're picking up all of these boreholes on a circuit of water. That's just another picture of it there. And that's actually the borehole itself. So you can see it's either 8 or 10 inches in diameter. They drill it down into the rock. They fill it with grout. And it's a special kind of grout that allows the conductivity of the earth to get to the pipes. And that's pretty much it. So it's a very simple construction. We've put these under ball fields and we've put them under parking lots. So the next steps is to continue talking about these things, to have a technical review of the building itself and talk about the envelope, which is the walls and the roof, building orientation, whether there's operable windows or fixed windows in the building, take a look at the controls of the building, and take a look at managing the loads, the energy loads of the building, and then actually select systems for your solar hot water, your kitchen equipment, heating and cooling, and then any kind of backup systems that you might want. And that's it. Yep.
Thank you. I have two questions. I should probably talk. The first question I have is, I'm not quite understanding. I mean, I understand that electric is more expensive, say, than natural gas. I get that. But if we are also utilizing these solar panels and the geothermal, I guess we're not really going to be paying as much for electricity. I'm just trying to understand that whole concept.
Right. So I think in one of the slides we said that if we, based on the size of our building, we'd be looking at 818 some number like that, of a kilowatt system.
Okay.
And that's what's taking up the 60,000 square feet. So if we're generating as much electricity as we're using in the building, it doesn't all get generated at the same time. So you're going to still be paying for delivery charges from your utility. You will not be paying as much for the electricity itself if you buy these things outright. So we have a client right now who looked at a power purchase agreement, which is something that allows a school to put the solar panels on the building at no upfront cost, zero.
Oh, okay.
And essentially, you then lease, or I should say, the power purchase agency, the agency that puts the solar panels on your roof, they lease your roof space.
Okay.
And you pay them for the electricity. So they work out, they look at what you pay, so that basically you're not paying any more. You may actually be paying just a little bit less,
Okay.
but you're basically paying the same amount
Okay.
to generate that electricity. But what you're getting is less electricity coming from the grid.
Yep.
So that's where you're either paying a power purchase agreement or you're paying for electricity.
Okay.
So that's why the money's not zero.
Got it.
We do have a client who decided they're not going to do that. They're going to spend, several $100,000. Well, I think it's between $400,000 and $500,000, and buy the solar panels outright. And the reason they're doing that is exactly your point. So for the next 20 years, they're not paying for a power purchase
Got it.
lease,
Okay.
and they're not paying for electricity for the amount that they make.
Got it.
So that's the.
Okay. And then my second question, and I apologize for just not knowing this, but if you have all these solar panels on the roof, if you have like a huge snowstorm, is that a concern that there's all the weight of the snow? And I mean, I understand that the solar panels are, obviously the heat and all, but if you have a really big snowstorm, is that a concern?
Right. No, I mean, you'll have a few days where they're not actually generating electricity. It's the UV rays that actually get to the solar panels that move the electrons that create the electricity. So depending on how thick that snow is, the UV rays can still get there, but they will melt quickly. But they're not going to generate as much electricity until that snow does melt.
But it's the weight of it isn't a concern on the solar
No.
panels
So the
or
roof,
anything like that.
the roof and the structural systems will all be designed. And really, it's not even snow that we're worried about anymore. It's this freezing rain
Freezing rain, right.
that ends up, soaking the snow. And basically, what you've got is buckets of water
Right.
on your roof, and not the snow. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the weight won't be an issue.
Can I just follow up on Denise's question, Ron? Because 3 years ago, we did have to spend quite a lot of money removing snow from the roof because the storms were so heavy. Are you saying in the design of the new school, we wouldn't have to be concerned with the weight of snow on this roof?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because engineers, like even as recently as 5 years ago, and I think the codes are catching up with it, but engineers were realizing that that's, you can do a code compliant building or you can do one to reality. And the ice storms and the rain we get, the worst thing, if you want to call it worse, is when you get a lot of snow and then it warms up and it rains and it really saturates that snow.
Right.
That's where you do have to get up there and start getting the snow off the roof, because you're no longer looking at a snow load, you're looking at a slush load.
Right.
And there's no code written around slush right now.
So if that were the case, if we were there this year and the school was up, with the solar panels on the roof, how do we remove the slush?
It would melt away.
We wouldn't have to physically go up there and move
No.
it like we are now.
No. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but you wouldn't have to go up there. Obviously snow. I've actually seen snow blowers up on the roof, which. But I don't think you'd need to do anything.
Okay.
No, it would melt away. Because you're certainly not going to get up on those car canopies.
Well, that's what we're asking.
Yeah.
Rod, just something we've talked about at our meetings. Your conception of this building would be that it wouldn't have windows that would open and shut. Is that correct?
So, yeah, we've done a couple of projects now where the owners decided that you've got a fully heated, fully air-conditioned, fully ventilated building, all being done with energy-efficient systems, so there's really no need to open a window. And I've walked by some schools that we've done, in fact, well, I don't want to talk out of school, but basically I've walked by a lot of buildings that we've done in the middle of January, and, the windows are open because the teacher just wants to open a window. But then there's other schools that say they want to open a window because they want to smell the fresh, the spring air and things like that, or the fall air. And sometimes it's a psychological thing too. So that's the balance. I mean, that's the balance in these programs. So if you look at the U.S. Green Building Council and the New Buildings Institute, they will say it's all about energy when it comes to energy. And so if you have fixed windows and you're able to control your environment, then you're using the least amount of energy. But the Well Building Institute would say, open the windows, because it's a psychological thing and people want to be able to open windows. So, like I said, some schools make the decision. We've got 2 or 3 buildings now that they're fixed windows. And I'm talking about libraries and schools that are fixed windows. We have some others who, they're all fixed except for one window. The funny thing today is you can't open a window like you can here. I don't know if you've put limits on your windows here. But windows today only open 4 inches. So you're just getting this little amount of air that comes through to begin with. When they're used to some old buildings that don't have limits, they just throw the window wide open. And you just, because of fall protections these days, you can't do that anymore. So, it's a trade-off. And by the way, the fixed windows are a lot less money than the operable windows.
Questions?
I think the next part of our meeting is public comments, and I think a lot of the audience are here to talk about certain things, but I think there is a discrete group here that is interested in the energy issue, and I'm wondering if we could maybe, if there are those people, move them to the front to make public comments while Ron's still here, so in case there are issues, or in a way it becomes a chance to, if something's raised, to get an answer even, if that makes sense.
I would prefer to hold public comment as we normally do it, if you would like to,
I think in the interest of wanting the community involved in this project and dialogue, to be able to have a little bit of give and take, perhaps, I would love to see those comments come first, but if I'm the only one who feels that way, then...
I hate to make you wait long.
Gotta do that now.
Sorry, but the public comments are like right after we approve the agenda. So can you see?
I'm in no rush. Yeah.
You're in no
just
rush.
like-
Can you just, so
Yeah.
actually, mainly what I really want is, if there are public comments that are questions, that you
Would
can
that be
hear them,
okay?
so you can write it
Yeah,
down.
I mean, that's what I was
Yeah,
trying to
absolutely.
achieve, was
Yeah.
to try to make your time...
So if you stick around and there's a public comment where you can answer briefly
Sure.
the question, we still want to hold the public comment to 30 minutes, but, okay?
Yep.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you, Ron.
Yep, thank you.
Ron. So approval of the agenda. There are a couple of changes because of what things that have occurred lately. There are 3 nominations, and those would go into the action section, I think right before we go to policy. The ratification of the ORAA agreement, it's the last details of that agreement that we need to approve, and that does not need to be in a non-meeting, that can be in a, so that will go before the 3 nominations. And there will be a non-public session dealing with a situation of a student. Is that correct,
Yep.
Dr. Morris? So that will be added. So those are 3 changes. So I'm wondering if I could have a motion to approve the agenda with those 3 changes. Brian?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Brian.
I'll second.
Second by Denise. All in favor?
But on our agenda, it lists them as being non-meeting, but they should be non-publics, right?
Non-public.
There's a
The
non-public.
one with the student is a non-public.
Yes,
Are we
we
going to
have-
get into the negotiation also, the preliminary to the guild negotiation? Are we going to talk about that tonight?
We can. I mean, all we need is financial guidance.
Okay, so that would be a non-meeting then, right?
Yep.
So that would be the non-meeting, but
Okay, so we're gonna have
it would
a
be non-public
and a
for the dealing with the student. Okay. So we voted on that?
We have a motion and a second.
Yes, okay. So all in favor? 7 in favor. The motion is The agenda is approved. Could I have a show of hands? How many people intend to speak tonight? How many people intend to speak? Just raise your hands high. Denise, can you count as well?
I'm only seeing like
1,
about
2,
4 or 5.
3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So each person who speaks, identify yourself and what town you're from, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. So who would like to start? What? What? Sure. I'm sorry. You have to come up.
Sorry.
It's, the meeting is recorded, which is why we need you to go to the microphone. Otherwise, the public who's watching doesn't hear your comments.
And you need to sign in so we have your name for the minutes. Okay.
Sorry.
No pressure.
Amy Pierce from Durham. I just have a question or sort of comment about the new construction stuff. Just briefly in that presentation, you noted putting in charging stations for 10 years down the road for buses. And I just want to make sure that we're thinking about the fact that within 10 years, there's probably a tremendous amount of technology improvement. And I don't know if we want to invest in things that we could do at the time when they're implemented that might be a very improved technology for that. And
Okay.
that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
John Carroll, Durham. I served as a member of the Green Team for James Hall for the LEED certification process, a significant renovation at James Hall. So I do take LEED certification and the benefits of LEED certification very seriously, and I hope you will look into that, the pros and cons of getting involved with that kind of certification. But it was a wonderful success story at James Hall, at UNH, and a number of subsequent buildings at UNH as well. I want to thank Superintendent Morse and the board for taking sustainability questions so seriously. I think we're making a tremendous start, and hopefully we'll educate the community to the real value of this, the teaching value of this for the students, not only the middle school students, but the high school students, the elementary students will all gain from this as well. One question that I would have is this whole business of what happens if 3 or 4 or 5 years after the project is finished, net zero is no longer being accomplished because some of the infrastructure is beginning to face wear and tear as we go on into the future. One fear that I would have in the model is that we might achieve eventually, after a period of years, a very low level of sustainability simply because of things wearing out and budget questions perhaps related to the idea of keeping the whole system up for maintaining that system which we would have on day one, but maybe not 3 or 5 or 7 years later, depending on what wears out. So I think that is something to consider as well. And I will sign in right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
I'm Stephanie Griffin. I live in Durham. I have 2 children in the middle school in 7th grade, and I wanted to talk about some concerns about the strategic plan and the discussion around the plan to potentially implement competency-based education at the high school level. So I'm a psychologist. I'm often thinking about kind of big picture stuff and trying to pull things together and responses, how people are responding. And so just a couple things I wanted to share about my observations. I'm sure most people are aware that there's been a lot of discussion and concern about the potential of implementing competency-based education at the high school. I think a lot of people in the community are aware that we're early in this phase of discussing this, that there is a plan to solicit feedback from the community, which I think is great. I also think that there's a lot of anxiety and concern because it feels as if there are a lot of unaddressed and unresolved issues at the middle school with regard to how competency-based education has been implemented there. And I know that other people have interacted with board members and administration about that. I think other people would be speaking tonight as well. And I really hope that the administration and board takes the time to speak with parents about their experiences at the middle school, about how parents feel this is working for their kids and for the families. That's a very important perspective to get. I think it would go a long way in terms of earning trust for parents that feedback is being taken about what's happening now before we start looking at the future. The other piece is that in terms of, I think, sharing outcome data would be very helpful. And by that, I mean, I wasn't aware of the discussions around implementation of competency-based education at the middle school, but I assume that there were some desired outcomes. There was a reason it was implemented, and that there hopefully are some outcomes that are being tracked at the middle school that would help us understand whether we are moving in a desired direction due to the implementation of competency-based education. And I'm not sure that that's being shared with the community. I'm not familiar with what outcome data are being tracked and gathered. And I think sharing that would also go a long way toward helping parents understand the rationale for looking at this at the high school, as well as getting buy-in from parents. That's all.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Troop. I am a resident of Lee. I have 2 children, 2 boys. One is currently in 7th grade and one is currently a junior at Oyster River High School. So my older son, I'm here to also talk about, follow up Stephanie's points about the competency-based discussions that are starting. My older son got out of the middle school before it was implemented. My younger son has only been in the competence-based, and I don't view it as competency-based education, I view it as grading in our middle school. There's a lot that I could say about it. This isn't the time for that because I know this is just starting and I have 3 minutes. It has failed my son, I will say that. But I think what's important, since it appears that you're ratifying tonight, putting it into the strategic plan in some form. I do strategic planning for a living, and there's a lot of really smart people around this table, so I do not at all want to come off sounding condescending. So if I do, then I apologize in advance. I do marketing communications and strategic planning, and I have never worked with an organization in my 20-plus years of my career where there was not a data-driven reason prior to something being put on a strategic plan. When you do project planning and that kind of planning, as Stephanie mentioned, there is goal setting and there's a why. And the why is based on information. And as a parent who's been in this community for a long time, I have zero background on the why of the middle school. I've seen or heard nothing about the high school. What is the desired outcome? What is the national data behind it? And data is not, we think it will emotionally support the kids better. Because what I've witnessed is, in my home it's not. I've spent a lot of time talking to kids in the middle school in a variety of grades who I would say are a variety of different kinds of kids when it comes to motivation, when it comes to academic level, if you will, when it comes to where they want to focus their time. There is a consistency, which is that they're not being pushed and they're not being motivated. And they've all figured out how to game the system and they're being allowed to. And I do not put this on the teachers. What I view as what has happened is the why of we want to support these kids is bleeding into a parenting decision again. In my home, my kids are not told that grades are their worth. I've never implemented that with my kids. I've never expected you guys and our schools to be the one that teaches it is or it isn't. If I happen to put that on my children, that's my problem, and that's my kids' problem, and it would be really unfortunate. But that's not how my family works, and I don't expect my children to also get involved in other people's families. So making a large decision like this because we feel that if we've been told it might support the children emotionally, it isn't a data-driven reason for the why, and we as a community have a right to know that why before there's a potential huge change that, since I have a high schooler, I'm baked in the reality of that. And these children need to have that kind of a motivation, and whether people like it or not, the grading is a piece of that. I very much would like to share with you, I think you've all been invited to the Facebook community group that is out there and the discussions that's being held about this. If you haven't, please join it. It's called Oyster River Competency-Based Education. It is open to all of you. There's a lot of discussion.
I'm sorry, your time is up. So.
Okay, this is for all of you from us.
Okay.
From some of us, along with for the principals. This is a preliminary gathering of detailed questions that we hope that you take the time to read. I'm also going to email it to all of you tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Morse. My name is Richard Kelly. I live here in Durham, and like Rebecca, I have 2 boys in the school system. One is a sophomore in the high school, and one is an 8th grader here. And I just want to take a moment of time to give a shout out to a middle school social studies teacher here, Nate Grove, and describe the experience that my 2 boys had in his classroom. Mr. Grove teaches 8th grade U.S. history, and he does these enactment classes, both Civil War and a colonial period. And as you may expect, it is very challenging to get a 14-year-old teenager excited about history. And I can tell you that he has achieved in doing that. And I think you'd probably agree with me that it would be a shame if that couldn't continue in our school district for future students. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other public comment? I see nobody else. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we need to approval of the minutes, both the non-public minutes and the regular minutes for the May 1st meeting. So I can have a motion to approve the regular minutes. Denise?
I'll motion to approve the May 1st regular meeting minutes.
Moved by Denise. Is there a second? Second by Brian. Are there corrections to those? No? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor. The regular minutes are approved. The non-public meeting minutes, Denise?
I'll motion to approve the May 1st non-public meeting minutes.
Moved by Denise. Is there a second? Second by Brian. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor. Those minutes are approved as well. So moving to announcements, accommodations, and comments from the district. We have a is there student presentation?
I think you're going to introduce the students, Suzanne?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Before I introduce the students, I just wanted to let the board know that I brought a copy of The Pearl. I will have additional copies for everybody. That is our literary magazine, and I just want to thank the English department for their tireless efforts with all of the students that participated in that. It's quite a beautiful work, and I hope you enjoy it. I will drop off other copies with Wendy later on this week to distribute. I just also want to let you know we have our National Honor Society at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Our musical is starting on the 23rd, and we'll be going throughout the weekend. We have our Power of One, which will be the 28th of May. We have our Senior Art Show, which is the 29th. A high school concert, the 29th. And our last coffee house will be on the 30th. And then I will bring you more updates as we progress to the end of the year, but also don't forget about graduation, which is going to be on the 7th at 6 p.m. at the WIT, and I hope to see everybody there to celebrate all of the work that the students have accomplished. And I'd also right now like to invite members of our Peace of Mind group. They're going to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do in their club. Thank you.
Where'd you go? Oh. Hi, my name is Genevieve, but I go by Evie, and this is my sister Emma, and we're both members of the Peace of Mind group, which Emma came up with the name. And I think we just passed our like 1 year of existence.
I think it's 2 years.
One year? I think it's one.
No, it's 2 years because originally we had, it was all seniors and then they graduated and then we took over.
Right.
Renamed.
Okay, we'll just go with what you say. So we've done quite a bit this year. One thing that we started over the summer is my sister started our Instagram page, which we just post about what we're doing for the most part.
Most part, that's only been like the newsletter. But
Yeah. A big thing that we did in November was the week of mental health forums. We did, there was like 3, correct? There was 3, well, 4 in total, but there was 3 student forums that took place during Flex. And they had different topics that surrounded, that had like the brief overview of mental health. And then we did a big community one where parents came in and we had a professor from UNH, we had one of the Peace of Mind members and her mother speak, and then we had one other speaker that I can't recall off the top of my head. Do you remember? Sorry. Oh yes, we had people from NAMI come. And we got to do a discussion. The Peace of Mind students got to facilitate that and lead that discussion, which was really cool. The other biggest thing we've done is the monthly newsletter, which goes in the bathrooms, which is why we've named it The Writing on the Stall. We have a copy of the May one, which is like and these newsletters follow the topics of the advisory monthly topics. May is mental health, which is why it's very mental health themed. We have copies for all of you guys. I'm just going to pass them to you so you can pass them around. Thank you. Newsletter, and a couple of our members, me and one other member, went to a went to a youth summit in early April. That is just like a youth like leadership, like, again, it was very similar to the community forum where it was like a discussion and we like picked up a lot of skills there. And we also did, this was connected to Peace of Mind, our what do you call them? Club advisor, I suppose. Ms. McAnoff organized this, and most of the Peace of Mind members were in this training, but we did a Connect Youth Suicide training also in April. And that is going to be, I believe, taught in the health classrooms. Is there anything else? I believe that's everything. So yeah, that's the brief rundown of a whole year of stuff that we did. Is there anything that confused you?
Or questions?
Or like general questions that you had? Yeah?
I just thank you very much. We did get a handout on the take the daily positive action, and do you want to explain where does that fit in?
Emma, you can do that.
So basically, because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, we wanted to kind of do something big that brought the community together, where like every day you'd have a positive action that you can take within your community to sort of support the mental health of yourself or others, or like, and all reduce stigma. Like there's things like hold open a door for someone, or like donate something that you don't need anymore for each specific day, just to sort of like remind everyone that it's like Mental Health Month, and there are things that you can just sort of integrate in your everyday life to sort of help with the cause.
Yeah, you don't have to, I guess the thesis of that like whole calendar of things to do is kind of, you don't have to be as like big of an advocate to help. You can just do little things, and that adds up to make a big difference.
And as a follow-up question, so was that distributed to the student, or how was that information conveyed?
They're in a couple of places. The handout is it's one of the things on the loop on the television screens around the school. Emma put up a bunch of them around the school, and like poster versions, and there's one that's sitting in right when you walk into the library, the desk. It's right there where like the students, there's one.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anything else?
How many people are involved with you all?
Officially, we have about like half a dozen kids.
Yeah, but a lot of these people are like in other groups,
So it's-
they don't always like attend meetings. For the majority of it, it's been me, but we also have like a handful of other kids. But like I said, they're in other like similar groups, so they can't always make it.
And your work is just so important. And
Thank you.
I think if you come up with ways that you feel that we maybe as a board might be able to better support your initiative, I think we'd love to hear that.
We will take you up on that offer.
But, yeah, I think it's real important. Thank you for doing it.
You're welcome. Okay, that's all.
Good work.
Just before you
What?
go, I just want to commend both of you for this year and your predecessors for last year. I mean, you guys are living commitment to this work, and I really appreciate your leadership in this area and all that you've done.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there other announcements, comments, and accommodations from the district? From the board? Denise?
I have two, and bear with me, a little bit longer talk than I usually do. The first one is just, again, to say I love this time of year with all the culminating projects, presentations, performances. There's things every day I could go to. I try to get to as many of them as I can, and I just want to commend, all the students and faculty for all their hard work, and look forward to all of these different demonstrations that I get to see. That was the first thing. The second thing is just that I do appreciate that there are some online forums or what have you, and basically have been open to say, school board members, welcome to come and join this group to see comments. I do want to remind people that as a board member, I'm not at liberty to just kind of offer my opinion on those different forums, because that discussion needs to happen at the board level. But I appreciate being able to go on and just see the comments. I will note, because I am at the board table now, and I've been wanting to say this all week, a lot of folks I've seen, board members have already made up their minds about competency-based education or what have you. Just speaking for myself, I can tell you I most certainly have not. That we are in the very beginning stages of a conversation, at least that's my understanding, and we have a long, long way to go. We don't know what it's going to look like. So I do ask folks to just, I think sometimes social media, it's easy to just, somebody makes a comment and then the next thing everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. And please, always ask the questions, come to the administrators, to us, to Dr. Morse, just to kind of get that information, tune into school board meetings, but I really want to reassure the community. I know, again, speaking for myself, I look forward to an extended conversation around this, and certainly have no preconceived notions about what the final product is going to look like. It may not change from what we have now. It may change a lot. We don't know. At least I don't know. So thank you.
Other comments from the board? None? District reports, Assistant Superintendent?
Thank you. I know you have a lot on your agenda, so I will be brief, but I did want to tell you about a couple of things that I think it would be worth anybody who has time to check these things out. Chris Hall is coming to the end of his sabbatical, and he sent an email that you should have all received outlining the 3 presentation days that he has set up for the various projects that our teachers have been working on. We've had 18 faculty members invest hundreds of hours over the course of the year engaging in the process of action research. And on May 21st at 3:45 at Mastway, there's 6 of them are presenting. On May 28th at the middle school at 3:45, 6 more are presenting, and the last session is June 4th at Mohammed. So if you can get to any one of those, it'll give you a real real sense of the kind of work that our teachers have been doing. In the email that Chris also sent with the invitation, there's a link to check out the website and blog that that is being put together to share that information. I know Barb Jasinski's first blog post is on there, and all of the teachers are being challenged to post their blog posts regarding to their research. So just something to be aware of, and encourage you to come and participate in that. In another similar type event, there was another action research group that focused on equity and inclusion, and it was run through the New Hampshire Listens program that we've been connecting with all year, actually over the last couple of years, looking at the issues of diversity. On May 24th, which is the Teacher Professional Day, it's a Friday, I know many of you may not be available, but between 8 and 9:15 on that morning, the 8 teachers who've been doing these action research projects around equity and inclusion in the classroom are going to be presenting their findings. So if you're interested in swinging by and checking that out, that's another great opportunity to see the kind of work that our teachers are doing to really to reflect and to get better. Last thing I did want to mention, we're closing in on the end of REACH registration. May 31st is sort of the point where I have to make determinations about which camps are viable. What that means is camps that have enough students in them to be able to run them. So I encourage people to be signing up if you've been thinking about it. We do have roughly 300 camps have already been signed up for this summer, which is significantly more than we've had in any past year, so it's very exciting. So again, community members, please be aware that May 31st is a key date with that, and encourage you to, if you've been thinking about it, get in there and sign up. If you go in to send money to school and discover the camp is not listed there, that's because it's already full. That's why they disappear as they fill up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's report?
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to turn it over to Celeste. The board was looking for a very brief report, and Celeste assures me it's a brief report on the learning management system that we're going to be using in the system next year called Schoology. So, Celeste.
Sorry, I'm really tall. Thank you. As Dr. Moore said, I'm Celeste Best. I'm a science teacher at the high school. And I know in March there was a little bit of confusion about a difference between an SIS versus an LMS, which right now that's a lot of technology information that doesn't make any sense to anyone. So I wanted to break down exactly what an SIS and an LMS are and where we're moving to. So an SIS is a student information system, and that is PowerSchool here at ORCSD. And you can see a lot of information there. And really, in terms of teachers in the classroom, we use about 10% of PowerSchool's ability. The rest is really for administration, counseling. It's our data storage system, and you can see the different things: course registrations at the high school and middle school, school registration for people when they move into district to register their students in school, or when they move between buildings, transcripts, grade aggregation, attendance tracking. I don't need to go through all of those, you can see those. But again, it's really important. How we do our state reporting is through PowerSchool, and that's why it's absolutely necessary to have an SIS, and PowerSchool is one of the best SISs that exists in the country. And I'm sure you've heard a lot, but we just moved to a student learning management system, which for us is going to be Schoology. 16 teachers did intensive 6-hour training yesterday to learn about what that's going to do, how we can leverage that for our students. And it really becomes a way for teachers to have management of resources, communication with students, differentiation. It's essentially the virtual component of you in your classroom. And I kind of describe both of these as icebergs. Teachers see about 10% of the SIS iceberg, but the LMS, we exist under the water with the majority of the iceberg, and that's what's going to allow us to really provide our students information anytime, anywhere, on any device when they're not with us in that classroom. It's going to help with communication, transparency. We shouldn't have very much of the "I didn't didn't know what I needed to do because a lot of that will be in the learning management system once we get there. It's going to take a number of years in our rollout, and we'll begin that for next year, and we'll actually begin the discussion and the training of that will start with a district rollout on May 24th during the Teacher Professional Day. Questions? Yeah.
So just to, oops, can you hear me? Just to kind of clarify, so when I look at the LMS, what does that mean for like a teacher? What does that mean I have to do? And what does that mean as a parent or a student? What does that mean to me?
So one of the biggest reasons we went to a learning management system is so that we have a K through 12 system that all teachers and all parents and all students will have access to. Obviously, that's going to look very different at different levels. You know, how the elementary school utilizes it versus the middle versus the high school, but it means that parents can go to one place and be able to look at their different children. You're still going to have to go to each individual child's dashboard, but it will look very similar, and you will have a calendar that will have access to all of the students' information at the different levels. Now again, September 1st next year, is everything going to be perfect and up and running and everyone is putting everything in there? No. But what we did yesterday was each building got together, we determined a district goal, and then each building set their individual building goals for next year. We can't do a 5-year plan right now because we still don't even know what the potential of the full program is, but we'll start to revisit midway through next year. What's our goal for next year? How are teachers going to utilize it? But Schoology, which is the program that we chose, has huge potential for all users. You know, there'll be users that will do, you know, kind of at the bare minimum when they're getting used to it because it's something new. And we'll also have people that are going to jump right in and do absolutely amazing things. And that's what we wanted. We wanted something to grow with our district and grow with us as we go into, especially at the high school, into that one-to-one situation. Yes?
Yeah. So maybe kind of following up with what Al asked, so, and I don't think any of us expect it to be perfect with a rollout, but again, with your mentioning who the tool will be used for, so of course our staff, but you also mentioned students and you mentioned parents. So I'm curious about how the communication piece is going to go to the parents so that they understand. Again, we heard a parent talk about the why we're doing this, and very important, how to use that tool and how that becomes parts of their lives. Because so often we launch these things and people don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. The kids know how to do it, and then they come home, and you as a parent are like, what is this? I don't know what this is. I didn't know what to check it. That's going to be part of our plan. Right now, I can't answer that because we haven't even had time, less than 24 hours since 16 of us even saw it for the first time, more than just the vendors speaking to us. But that will be part of our rollout. I'm sure open houses where parents will be coming into the buildings, getting a chance to see them, communicating with teachers, and then I'm certainly sure newsletters from each building, potentially community events as how to utilize and look at things like we have done when we rolled to Power School several years ago. We had that same, it was the kids are going to get training, the teachers are going to get training, and we need to provide the community and parents training on how to utilize it also.
And you brought up Power School, and I think that's a very fair thing to talk about. And I think with the introduction of Power School, there was such a lag between users knowing how to use that system, not meaning teachers. And I think, speaking for myself, I would say the rollout, I don't see the urgency. To me, the really primary thing is thinking about how we're going to bring this to the community and to explain to them, this is coming, understand it, and then do the rollout. I think it's backwards to do the rollout and do the explaining, if that makes sense.
But at the same time, this is what teachers are going to be using in their classroom to provide students with their resources, with their assignments. So we have to train the teachers first on how to use it, see what they want to do with it, how they're going to use it, so that they are ready for September 1st, so that our students, when they're walking in, and one of your next agenda items is the discussion about one-to-one with the freshmen for next year. You know, we have several teachers who are going going to walk in. And we also are looking at, should we be handing out hundreds of pieces of paper when we now have a program where resources can be electronic? And I'm not making a statement that that's going to be 100% by any means, or that every teacher is going to use this all period, every day. Our teachers are at in the front line, and they need to have an understanding of how to use this first to begin the conversation of what do we need to show the parents, how do we need to teach the parents.
Sorry.
Well,
Go ahead.
so is this like, I just remember when my son was in college and he had, so, okay, now I know what we're talking about.
He probably had Campus or Blackboard.
Blackboard.
Yep,
So this is Blackboard, okay.
This
Now I know what
is
this is.
much better
Okay.
than Blackboard.
Okay.
And Schoology is a K through 12 focus, meaning they do not deal with higher ed. And we came down to our two finalists of Schoology and Canvas, which are the kind of the two forefronts in the LMS world. And Canvas deals a lot with higher ed. And it didn't really have a look or a way to work with our elementary strongly, because it's very different at the elementary level versus at the high school level. And they are K through 12 focused. And one of their biggest things is their teachers can actually email, pick up a live chat, or call them 24/7 for support and how to do things.
Okay.
But yes, it's very similar to what your son would have seen, just newer version.
So I would definitely say, I would hope that the paper version of the, syllabi and all that sort of stuff would still exist, even if there's teachers that are very much on board with this, because I know if I were a parent and also, my child came home and it's like, we've gone to this system, how do I get on? Oh, I can't tell you, I don't know, where's your syllabus? Oh, it's on there. That would, as a parent, would drive me crazy. So I would definitely hope that while the transition phase happens, that there is that side by side, that it's happening both ways, so that, people aren't feeling that frustration of, I don't know how to do this, I can't get at it, that type of thing, because that training definitely takes a while. Some more slowly than others. And then I have one other question. Oh, so as far as the grading for next year, like if a parent wants to go on and see
Power School.
It's still going to be Power School.
Power
Okay,
School.
Thank you.
I had a question just in terms of the rollout. So you say there's going to be one day, a professional day in May?
That is just going to be where we're introducing what the district goal, the tech integrators will present to the entire faculty and staff as to what the district goal is.
But then you see this being in use in August?
Yep. Because on June 24th and 25th, we are offering the 3rd annual ORCSD Tech Bootcamp that teachers can sign up to come to as part of a professional development day and get paid the per diem $150. And the focus is going to be Schoology, and then also open lab time where teachers can go to a training session in the morning. They could repeat that session in the afternoon if they feel that they need
So
that.
what percentage of teachers will take it? I mean,
Well, last year we had 75 teachers attend in the boot camp. I can't answer what that percentage is. The registration doesn't open until next Friday.
Just my sense is that it would seem to me that to have a year of training and getting people ready, as opposed to these like 3 days that you're talking about, and then to have it ready to go in August, it seems to me to be inviting a kind of a chaos in terms of a starting point.
Well, as I said, we have a district goal that is open to interpretation by the buildings, and each building is going to set their individual goals. And it's, for example, I can only speak to the high school, but at the high school level, one of our first goals is to make sure all critical resources are available on Schoology for the beginning of next year. The two things we identified that are the course syllabus and the competencies.
Okay.
So there's
So that's the goal, so that everybody's done that, but
Yes.
which takes just a fraction of what the potential of Schoology could
Yes.
do. Okay.
So it's not you have to have everything electronically, do everything electronically as of the first day of classes. There are some teachers who are early adopters and are going to jump on board because they're already using Google Classroom to that extent. I had a teacher in the training describe this as Google Classroom on steroids. And it has a very similar look, but has a lot more options. So a lot of our teachers are already utilizing a program with which to present to their students information, not in a binder, not as a printed out, and to have electronic information that way. So you'd be surprised at the percentage that this is not something that is new. It is just, this is a much, much better program and much more organized and protects our student data.
What is the district goal? You mentioned it several
I'm not
times.
sure. I'm not sure I can quote it because it's still written down from yesterday. Is that ORCSD employee or faculty and staff will utilize Schoolology in order to present students with electronic resources. And I can have a better statement. I can also share with the board the PowerPoint for next Friday where that is articulated clearly. But it gives a lot of freedom to teachers. We're going to have tech integrators who are working really hard within their buildings to assist all teachers. I know at elementary and middle and high school, the communication about built-in time during the school year, not just the first 3 days, not just the 2 teacher workshop days at the beginning of the year, but opportunities for teachers to get help when they need it, when they want it.
What kind of evaluation will you have? I mean, for example, it's a possibility that teachers might find this kind of a I mean, they might not find this to be useful. I mean, how are you going to evaluate, whether this is working?
Again, we're already there. We have teachers who are using Moodle, who are using Google Classroom heavily, and the reason that we went to the learning management system of Schoology was to protect our student data and to use something that will grow with us as a district, K through 12. So the evaluation process is going to be building to building, so I can't speak to that. And then obviously based on building evaluations, we would be able to look at an overview of a district evaluation and whether or not this is working. But right now we have potentially every teacher in this district could be using something different. And if you have families that have someone at Moheramet, someone at the middle school, someone at the high school, someone put a number out yesterday that a parent could have to go to 27 different websites to find information. And so we are trying to make it one place.
Okay, I realize the rationale. I'm saying that I think if you're going to put it in place next year, there should, maybe school by school, there should be some kind of monitoring of how successful it's been, because we can imagine that it's going to be successful, but they might find it cumbersome, they might find it too time consuming, they might find,
Absolutely.
There are things that could go wrong, and we should know what those things are. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I think that's just a prudent step. So will we be able to see like an evaluation? Is that going to be?
Absolutely. Again, like I said, we were introduced to it yesterday for 6 hours. So all of us right now are beginning to just think about how are we going to roll it out to staff? How are we going to support staff? And then how are we going to reflect upon it at different points during the year so that we can establish new goals and that we can assist in moving forward.
Okay.
Will we be migrating everything that's in other tool sets like Moodle and Google Classroom into Schoology?
Yes.
What's the overlap time that's planned?
So the district goal is set for by June of 2020. Again, I can't speak to...
So 1 year. So year.
So 1 year. Yep. Moodle we are running a very, very old version of Moodle that doesn't have the capabilities that teachers need to have. And if we were to look at numbers of teachers who are actually still using it, that's a very small number. There are a large number that are using Google Classroom, and those building administrators know that that's going to take more support to migrate them. Schoology communicates with Google Drive and Microsoft Office one-to-one, and yesterday one of the trainers in the Train the Trainer program, one of the high school teachers who uses Moodle heavily, he migrated 3 of his 4 classes in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Which we didn't expect. I was very happy that he tried that. I was like, oh, this is not hard.
So, other questions? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lester.
Just one thing. I think you probably. Celeste, can I just. So, you really got a lot of questions, and I hope you don't walk away from it thinking that we're being critical, but I think we've been burnt from experience about rollouts and not being rolled out. And I think even to Tom's thing about really having the feedback, that, as a physician, electronic medical records are going to be the most wonderful thing in the world.
Until they don't work.
It's probably why family doctors are leaving medicine, heads over heels, because it doesn't work very well. And just because we have a new technology system doesn't mean it's going to be nirvana. And I think doing those gut checks are incredibly important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been in the district for 22 years. I've seen a lot of things come and go and kind of all of a sudden dropped and been like, oh, it's June 20th and we start in August 28th. Here we go, figure it out. And that is absolutely something that we are working very hard to plan. And that's why our district goal and the building goals are very open-ended so that the comfort level of teachers can still meet that district goal, but at their pace and on their terms. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. We good? Oh,
Yeah, we're good.
questions?
We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Thank you.
We're good. Expand the laptop initiative to 9th grade.
I want to just save that, Tom, because there's several issues that happened today that I want to bring to the board's
Okay,
attention.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I sent you all in the community the information regarding to Carrie decided to end her 7-year run in the district as of June 30th. And I got into a conversation with Tom this morning, and you know me, I always think I can do things and get them done. So the process we used when we hired David Goldsmith at Moheramet was a 4-month-long process. And that process started around Thanksgiving and carried us through March. This is, I built a schedule that absolutely could bring a candidate to you on June 19th, but it's not a 4-month process. It's a 5-week process. And Tom and I kind of kibitzed back and forth today and said, is that fair to the Massway community to take a 4-month process and squeeze it into 5 weeks? And ultimately, I decided that I would recommend to the board that that's not fair to the Massway community, and we should take the time necessary to do a thorough search. And the time to do that search isn't in the spring when people have made decisions related to where they want to work. We really need to follow the model we followed at Moheramet and make it a Thanksgiving to March conversation. And so in that light, what I would recommend to the board is that we honor that process and we bring an interim in for the upcoming school year. And that will give us time to meet with the Lee community. It gives us time to have thoughtful discussion with the faculty and staff, and it announces the opening at a time when people are looking for administrative jobs, not in late spring. So that's my plan to share with the staff tomorrow, and then I'll send out a notice to the community. I wanted to make sure that you all knew where I was coming from. If anybody has any strong objection to that, I'd like to hear it, because that's kind of where I am, and I think it's the right move for Lee and Massway School. So, comments?
Well, actually, I was on the hiring committee of Carrie to start with, and I was on the hiring committee of David, so I got to see both in like a span. And I would like to say that I thought that the Moheramet process was really, really, really good. I really liked the way it was done. I like the inclusion of the staff, and there's just no way we can do it right now.
Right.
And so I think that this is one of those, it's a big decision. I think trying to do it in May doesn't put us in the best position, or the school in the best position to succeed. So I think your idea of having an interim, really let the process play, using what we learned from the Moheramet process is just a much better idea.
Are we okay with that?
I agree. I was, I was also on that committee, and it takes time for sure, and I think it's worth taking that time because it worked really well.
Okay. Not hearing any objections, that's the process I'll go forward with. Okay. Thank you. I do want to just come piggyback. I know we do repeat ourselves a little bit, but Denise and I attended an amazing strings concert that was done last week in the gymnasium at the high school, because literally there was no room in our high school auditorium to have the presentation. Todd, Alan, Jay, and myself had a middle school exhibit on the hallway going down. The next day I was in Concord. Todd and Jay had the same exhibit the very next day for the orchestra presentation for the middle school. We got lots and lots of questions, much like the pancake breakfast situation, where we were available and people would stop and look and ask questions. I attended my first meeting of the Governor's Equity and Inclusion Committee last week. I was kind of shocked because I thought it would just be, like representatives from my level, but the Governor's Commission has all his commissioners there, so it was in the Governor's executive boardroom, and I felt like I was a little bit like a fish out of water, because I've never sat in a room with so many bigwigs, I guess is how I would describe it. But at the end of it, I contributed to the work that we've been doing in the district, and all of these major players in state government were so impressed with the work the district has done. I shared the work that we've been doing for the last couple of years and the work that we plan on doing in the next 5 years. And I just wanted to share with you how much the Governor's Committee was impressed with the work we're doing in the district. Going back to the agenda, expanding the laptop initiative to 9th grade. My memo that I sent you gives you the highlights of why I would like to do this. First and foremost, about 50 students coming into the high school would have to have their laptops continue with them because they have IEPs that require that kind of individualized support. And when we get into a situation where about, we'll say 20% or 25% of the students are using a laptop on a regular basis and the other 75% in the class are not, you get into that situation where you're identifying who's receiving services and who isn't. The other issue that I think is really important is that it allows the rollout to high school at the high school to be in stages. So if we don't do it, the 8th grade kids come into 9th grade and they don't have the laptop they had in 8th grade, which seems sort of counterproductive. But if we do it, then all of the kids who have a laptop in 8th grade, bring them into 9th grade. And so the following year, we only need the equivalent of one more grade because there's enough technology at the high school. Today, we're at about 2 to 1. We go with the laptops at 9th grade, then we'll be at 3 to 1. And so when we switch over completely to a laptop initiative like we did at the middle school, the cost will be borne over 2 budgets. Identifying the resources, always the question that you ask. What I asked Josh to do is reprioritize his technology budget. He was going to do a major upgrade of iPads in the district, and what we would do is delay that for a year in order to accomplish this. It's no different than what we do with Jim Rozicki when we're looking at the capital plan and we start adjusting priorities. We're still using the same money. We're not spending money we don't have, but it's after much conversation with Suzanne and Celeste, we think this is a rational approach to expanding the one-to-one program into the high school.
And I can totally understand. It makes sense to me. I just want to make sure, because we do have the Barrington students that will come into 9th grade that won't have that experience of having their own laptop, and just want to make sure that there's going to be the appropriate, training and support for those students, and not just the assumption, oh, these students have already all had, this laptop, they already know what it's all about.
Barrington is 1-to-1 in their district already. So they should come in with some halfway decent knowledge.
Okay, cool. I did not know that. Thank you.
Any other questions related to that particular report?
Do you need a motion to do this?
I don't think so, because we have a motion later on a lease, but this doesn't require a motion.
Are we able to get the same pricing as we have on the current set? And are we adding, is this a new set, an additional 25% on a separate, what, a 4-year lease cycle?
So it's a different model, a year newer. I think it's a quad-core processor instead of a dual-core. Minor changes, same form factor, same design. It will be a new 4-year lease. And pricing. So originally, this year, we purchased, it worked out to be close to 1,000 devices, and so we're only going to be looking at about 230. So I think the price difference was about $24 a machine higher this time around.
Based on the volume?
Based on the volume.
Okay.
Yeah.
There have been, some industrious middle school students who have tried to find creative ways to utilize their laptops and defeat your defenses.
It's a never-ending battle.
Extending to high school just extends that challenge more. Is there, how do you feel about how we're doing in terms of supporting the middle school students and teachers in that effort? And is there something different needed for the high school?
I don't know if there's anything out there that is different for the high school. I mean, we certainly have, the way we've set things up is on tiers, so there's a different set of filters for middle school versus high school. We tend to open things up as they move through the system, especially when they get into the upper grades. There's nothing that's ever going to be 100%, so we do the best we can when we know about it, and I think that's the big challenge. I was looking one day, I had a parent contact me about how do we monitor all the websites the kids visit, and in one day, I think the number of unique websites visited by students at the middle school was around 51,000. And that's just during the school day. There's no way for us to monitor. We rely on a system that has a database that they've built, and we rely on their categorization. And if there's an issue, we go back and look at it and try to identify what happened. We've made lots of changes. We've had lots of phone calls with our filtering company. I'm going to have a kind of year-end call with them and say, here's all the areas that we feel you need to step up your game, or else we're going to have to see if there's a vendor who does better. But it's a challenge at every school district. So I feel like we're doing the best we can, and compared to my peers, we run into the same issues across the state.
But I would add, Josh, because I think you're underselling the active nature of your support for parents. When we do get a query from parents, Josh is right on top of it. He then has to figure out how the kid is getting to the games, and once he figures that out, then we close that hole down. Might be 2 weeks, we get another call from a parent. We figure out what's going on, we close it down. I would also add that, so the parents are really great help, so are the teachers. The one piece that I would share that I think is super important for the board to hear is the damage on laptops is someplace in like the 1% level, which is extremely low. Our kids are being very respectful of the equipment we're giving them. And so, as Josh said, in terms of making sure the kids are always going to places where they should, we rely on the teachers and parents to help us see where they've gone, where they shouldn't go, and then Josh has been very active in trying to address those issues very quickly. I don't think there's an issue that's gone by that's been unresolved more than 24 hours from the time he hears it and the time it's adjusted.
The challenge is the timeliness of getting everything to us. And I would say the number one issue that I'm aware of, and Jay can certainly speak to it too, is student games, is the use of games. Any sort of access to adult material has been very minimal, maybe 1-2 cases. I would say every single time we have a concern raised by a parent, it's around my students playing they feel they're playing games too many times and have access to too many gaming sites. And there's a lot out there. We did have a couple create their own to collect all the sites so that they could share with their fellow students, go to here. And so, yeah, we've worked diligently to do the best we can. But luckily, I mean, games, I'm okay with kids accessing games and having to work through that. There's a lot scarier things out there, and
for sure.
we haven't had to have those conversations, which is great. So,
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
yeah.
Thanks, Josh. And I just wanted to make sure to keep this in front of the board. You have the latest kindergarten numbers. For Massway, it's at 63 students, and that's grown. And at Moheramet, it's at 51 students, so that's grown. And so the need for an additional kindergarten teacher at the Massway School, I don't think is disputable anymore. I think it's been, let's wait and see. Well, the wait and see is seeing the numbers go up. And I'm far more confident tonight than I was 2 weeks ago or a month ago that through careful hiring, we'll have the funds to support the additional teacher. You'll see some of those savings tonight. You'll see more savings in 2 weeks. So I do think we need to be in a position to act on the need for that teacher no later than 2 weeks because the numbers are there now. And then the tech integrator is a critical component. We have a proposal to do it half in this upcoming school year at the high school and then the other half in the following budget. I think that's worth doing. I do think we'll have the money to do that as well in 2 weeks due to prudent hiring. And the last thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention is a memorandum of understanding with the town of Lee. I think it might have been Brian who made me aware that there was a change in practice coming that would have taken us out of most preferential treatment, if you will, in terms of using Lee facilities. So I contacted the select board and said, is this what's going on with this change? And it was Scott who said, well, that wasn't intended the way it's being interpreted. And I said, well, both of us are appointed or elected officials, and I'd be concerned that at some point in the future a new select board or new manager or new superintendent wouldn't know that we have such a tight relationship. So I said, what do you think about establishing a memorandum of understanding or a resolution committing each other to not charging each other for the use of fields or buildings or other services. And you can see that the select board went forward with it, and basically I would like a motion from the board supporting this resolution, and then both the town of Lee and the Oyster River Cooperative School District have a resolution that will stand in perpetuity until one or the other makes an overt change. And I think it's a really great statement of support for each other. I think, quite frankly, if this needs your support, then we should reach out to both Madbury and Durham and replicate it. But I think it's a really nice thing to have on record. So
we'll need a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding. Brian?
Motion to approve the MOU with the town of Lee.
Moved by Brian. Is there a second? Second by Michael. Further questions about it? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor. Motion passes, and I can sign it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And that is the end of my reports.
Can we go back to the enrollment for a moment? Is there reason not to move forward with an additional kindergarten position tonight?
I would love it if you feel confident enough, I'm confident enough, Michael, that we'll have the funds to cover it at this point. I know what's coming in the pike in 2 weeks. I know because they're not here tonight is only because there wasn't time enough to get more positions in front of you tonight. These 3 are pretty indicative of what you'll be seeing. I'm comfortable, if you guys are comfortable, authorizing the kindergarten position at Massway because it will be needed.
So that one in particular, I think that we should go ahead and move forward with and get as far, and we're already not very far ahead in the hiring cycle. I think we should do what we can, given that we are already at an average class size of 21 if we take no action. So I move to authorize an additional kindergarten teacher from Massway starting for the fall 2019.
Moved by Michael, is there a second? Second by Brian.
I'll just comment. And I get it on the one hand, on the other hand, I'm still wondering if, we did actually, it looks like, have one drop on Mohammed, because we were at 17, 17, 18 last, and the last time we got the enrollments, I had April 18th as the date. So now we're at 17, 17, 17. Again, looking at the projections, we're above projections. I'm just wondering if there is some folks that are determining whether they're really going to send their kids to public school, or maybe looking at private schools, or I'm just not sure that if the numbers will hold up, I guess, a little bit.
I think the history of it, Denise, would say that over the course of the summer, we would expect some increase. Remember, one year we had 36 students show up over the summertime. Another year it might be 6 students, but it's never gone down over the summertime since we've all been together.
Yeah, but we're still, I mean, we're above, we're definitely above projections.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if we are going to possibly lose a couple of students. I'm not sure, but.
So if we were still at this point in 2 weeks, how would you feel?
Oh, yeah, I mean, because obviously we have to make a decision to be able to hire a teacher. And I'm not disputing that if numbers stay where they are, that we need it. I'm just wondering if the numbers are really gonna hold, I guess.
So look at it from a different perspective, Denise. The Massway School, those numbers are at 21 now.
Right, yes.
And if the Mohammed stays at 17, that means there's only 3 spots open at Mohammed, and we're over-enrolled in kindergarten as we're having this conversation by 3 students by board policy. So
Right.
we're not even close to the board policy at Massway. So I think, you're safe in making the motion tonight. I don't really see that we're going to lose that many students at Massway. And if we lost 1 or 2 over the course of the summer, that still would be unusual, because we've always either been stable or gone up in the elementary enrollments in 7 years.
And I think understanding Denise's point, I think, though, Denise, you're mentioning kind of the summer, and maybe there will be a change over the summer, but I don't think anything's going to change between today and 2 weeks. And I think I'm waiting for the summer for possible changes too. So nothing's going to change in 2 weeks.
We did lose 1 student in the last 2 weeks, so I mean, we would have to lose 6 students to be able to, because we can take 3, because there's 9 to be placed. We could potentially take 3 of those students, move them to Mohammed, to get at our 18 there, and then we're 6, so then we're basically 2 students over in every class. And I mean, I'm not saying that, 20 would be above, obviously, our guidelines. I guess that, and I know we're on a tight budget, so I guess that's my balancing act, is that, if these numbers hold, yes, we need another teacher. If we hire another teacher and we lose 6 kids, and just like, is that money that we need for something else?
Yeah.
And
Well,
especially if we're doing a search for a principal next year and all that whole thing.
So remember that the reason I've been trepidatious about going forward with the recommendation is because I couldn't see the funds to support it.
Right.
And starting tonight, and what I know is coming in the next 2 weeks, there are funds to support it from our new hires. So I am comfortable tonight saying to you that we will have identified the funds to support the kindergarten. I would not say that there's any other more pressing need than that in the district, because our kindergartens are the most important grade, kindergarten and first grade, in terms of giving kids the best start possible. So even if we lost 6 kids, you're talking about the Massway School being at the recommended guidelines for the board, and the Mohammed School being close to. So I don't think we're going to be in a situation, if we hire the teacher, that we'll be seeing tiny kindergarten classes, I think we'd be seeing pretty close to what you would want for a kindergarten class.
What's the fastest you've ever hired a teacher from when you posted the requisition?
I post for 2 weeks. I post internally for a week, and then if there's no internal candidate, the posting carries for another week. And then during that time, we will have, for a kindergarten position, we'll have many, many, many applications.
But we want to hire somebody within 3 weeks.
I would want to hire somebody within 3 weeks.
You would have time to post, close, interview, and make an offer within 3 weeks?
Yep. Yeah.
What if we said 3 weeks in a day? But not seriously.
If you said I had to
Then
hire...
the money doesn't work anymore.
If you said I had to hire in 2 weeks, I could do it. Because it's an elementary position. Primary positions are incredibly popular. If it was a high school chemistry position, I wouldn't be able to accomplish it that fast.
Yeah. Well, so the reason to do it now and not 3 weeks from now is to attract the best possible, the highest quality possible candidate pool.
Exactly.
And the reason I'm asking the question was probably pretty clear, but if we don't have a candidate hired, a job offered in 3 weeks, and something unexpected happens with enrollment numbers between now and then, we could potentially not make the job offer. Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So we had a motion, right? Do we have a second?
Yes. Yeah, we have a motion and a second.
Other questions? Discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor. Okay, you have your authorization.
Thank you.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
With the numbers.
And that's the end of my report tonight, Tom.
So do we have a business? I don't think we...
No,
okay, Susan's here.
Sue's not here tonight.
And the student center report. So why don't we go to the network switch lease, and then we'll take a break.
Good evening again. I guess it was in March, we brought for you an RFP for some wiring and some switches, and so this is just the lease approval for the switches on the RFP that you approved in March. We're looking at doing a 4-year lease with we own them at the end. Right now, the current switches we've had, by the time they get replaced, we've had them for 6 years. And so that is our plan. Any questions? And this covers every building except the middle school, just because with the changes potentially happening, I didn't know if I essentially would have to run 2 networks when we cut over, and so it just made sense to let's just build new when the middle school is new. So it covers every place but the middle school.
So could we have a motion to approve the network switch lease?
So moved.
Moved by Al, second by
Second.
Denise. Other questions?
This is in the budget, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Ready? All those in favor? 7 in favor? That's approved.
Thank you.
So let's take a 5-minute break.
Bathrooms are down at the bottom of the stairs to your right.
Oh, we didn't vote for the integrator, though.
No, we didn't put that
Okay.
out there.
So we're just, okay. It's already 9. We still have a ton of stuff here. But whatever.
Let's see.
Anyway, we'll just see what the not the non-public, the non.
What's the action?
That's on the Guild.
Yeah, that could be quick, though. We'll see how we do.
We'll just see how we do it.
Okay.
Now, do we have a written student senate report? Did we get one? I suggested it.
I didn't see it.
Because I asked if we could get one. I don't know if there was one or not.
It's still not working.
I'm
thinking about it.
There was no student senate. She didn't give us one.
I didn't see it.
At least no one I'm aware of.
Okay, hopefully we can have a motion to approve the strategic plan as a second read. So I was trying to figure out a way to do this without getting just caught up in too much confusion. And I thought, first, like we have listed here all of the changes that were recommended from the last time. And so maybe as a first question, is that satisfactory? Have all those changes, has anybody seen a change that we requested that hasn't been made? And if the answer to that is that that's satisfactory, the second question I want to ask, is there any other change to any other part? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And if we can accommodate those, then we're ready to vote. So does it sound okay for the plan?
Yep. So I have a thing.
Okay.
Is this the time to raise it?
Oh, is this about something that was correct,
But so it's part of what we have in our
Okay, go.
packet and
Go.
something. So it's on the competency-based education.
Okay.
At the high school?
Yeah, at the high school.
Okay.
And, in the 2023-24 in the 5-year outcome, it clearly is stating we're going to move to competency-based education there. The 2022-2023 is kind of in that middle ground, where you're left in the 2021-2022 is still getting feedback.
Okay.
And I feel that given what we've heard from parents throughout this process, and it raises the same concerns that I have, is that I would want to put a stop at 2021-2022, and at that point it becomes a board consideration. Are we going to move forward, and if so, what do we move forward for? The way it looks here is it's kind of a done deal that we're going to move to CBE, and I don't know.
No, it doesn't. Because it says in 22-23, the board will have a discussion
And
regarding...
2023, 2024, it says fully implement CBE.
Right, we need to get rid of that.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Oh, but you
Yeah.
said 2021, 2022, and I'm saying
No.
2022, 2023,
Right.
we're having the discussion.
Right, but the way that is worded is a little biased towards moving in the direction of competency-based, and I'd rather leave it neutral at that point in saying the board is going to consider grading systems and perhaps you even separate grading systems from education systems. I mean, I think you can have both a grading system that's numerical or whatever and have competency-based education. So I would like that 2022 is where we really have a discussion about all possibilities and not have the implementation in those last two bullets.
So what's your recommendation now?
So I would take out what's listed under 2023-24 and let's take out the 5-year outcome. Kind of like we did with foreign language, in a way, do that. And then the 2022, the board will have a discussion regarding ORCSD grading and reporting systems, including the possibility of competency-based education, and begin to formalize a plan going forward or formalize the system going forward.
Can I speak a little about the...
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the 2023, 2024, we are already implementing competency-based education at the high school. It's the grading method that we were evaluating and we're talking about now. So we already have competencies at the high school. That's a state mandate. It's something that the faculty have been doing in standards. So maybe it's a language shift that we need to look at. It says in 2022-2023, the board will have a discussion regarding Oyster River High School grading and reporting systems to reflect competency-based education and have an evaluation of it. So that's more of sort of the discussion of the implementation of what we want it to look like. It doesn't necessarily say that it's going to be a 4-point scale or it's going to be a 60-point scale or a 100-point scale. It just is very vague in the language. I don't know if that's if it's the language that you'd like to shift.
So like the 2023, 2024, what you're really saying is fully implement competencies, really? You're not, because you're not saying...
Well, we're already implementing them, and competencies are, we're already implementing, they're constantly changing and evolving as faculty use them, so that they're, according to what is, according to their curricular needs and the work that they're doing with students. So
you just haven't decided by 2023 necessarily how, at this point, how you're actually going to grade them.
Right. I mean, that's
so you're just separating.
The point. Right.
So I'm separating competencies from the actual grading.
Right.
Because
So
you're going to implement competencies.
Yeah, there's
by
the
state
curriculum and instructional piece. There's the assessment, grading, and reporting piece. Those are all they're all under the same umbrella, but they're all a little bit separate. So the curriculum instruction piece is something that the high school's been working on well before I ever arrived, and we've continued to work on that. And that is around the competencies and the instructional practices. And then there's the assessment piece, which is I think any educator is always asking, am I assessing students in a way that allows me to determine what they know and are able to do regardless of whatever the grading practices are. So we're looking at assessment, and then there's the grading piece. And so this part of the strategic plan for competency-based education lends itself to that discussion of our assessment practices and our grading practices, is this for the high school and for the faculty, are we able to assess what students know and are able to do, and what do we want the grading system? Is it matching what we're doing? Is it helping us and helping students move forward in their education? So we already are doing the competency-based education. It's just the grading piece. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
So because this is one of my favorite activities in the world, which is wordsmithing at this table, what we're really trying to do is we're just distinguishing in 2023, and I don't know what the correct wording is, that we fully implement, we're fully implementing actually defining competencies or utilizing competencies in our instruction. We just haven't actually agreed upon, and that's what Kenny's pointing out, we just haven't agreed to the grading system. So it's the language of the 2023, 24 to somehow come up with that, and again, that's, we'll leave that to somebody else.
I guess I don't see anything in here that would preclude us from doing what we have to do. Because obviously the board has to sign off on a grading system. That's in policy.
Yep.
So if that's part of the CBE program, like there's parts of, we don't get involved in all curricular issues, but we do get involved by policy and grading. So that would have to come in 2023, 24. So, just by policy, we'd have to do that.
Well,
right?
I'm sorry. So I think what's confusing is saying fully implement CBE program. So to Kenny's point, I think we need to cross that sentence out of fully, because that implies that we're doing the grading. By saying we're fully implementing this program, to me it implies that we're doing the grading. So I think we need to eliminate that sentence, find something better that reflects that we haven't decided on the grading part. We don't know what that's going to look like. So maybe we just take that out of that completely. But I think we definitely need to get rid of the sentence that says fully implement CBE program.
I'm wondering if it's the same language in 2022 and 2023, if some of that same language can be brought over with just a little bit of wordsmithing, because it sounds like that's what the board would like to do, is to continue that conversation and bringing in all of those different stakeholders to the table, having that conversation and looking at decision-making around that, or defining.
So is this really tied to competency-based education at all, or is this rethinking the grading system? That's certainly a piece of it, because we've developed competencies for all the courses, but there are lots of other purposes and effects of the grading system. And
yes.
I wonder if we're getting too focused on the competency-based education
grading system. Yeah. So can I just pick up on what you're saying, Michael? When we do competency-based work, the best advice is you leave grading for last. So you identify the competencies, you identify the assessment practices, you refine the competencies, you refine the assessment practices, and then you have the discussion about grading. And the whole issue, the reason you do that is grading is the third rail here. And you've seen that it's generated a lot of parent interest. It also generates a lot of staff interest. So the competencies have been identified at the high school for every course at this point. And the staff has been working on how they would assess those competencies per every course. And then the last piece of this is, what's the grading system going to look like? It's very possible the grading system looks just like it does now. The competency piece can act in the background. The grading system can be disconnected. That's really what happens in a lot of high schools. Competency-based education is occurring as a methodology to outline the goals of a given course, and then teachers assess those goals and monitor students' progress. Concurrently, they hang on to the old system. And the reason they do is for this very reason. It's very, very controversial to let go of a traditional grading system, and causes great distress. And we've seen only a little bit of this tonight. We've seen a lot of it in email, and we'll see a lot more of it if we leave the impression out there that Oyster River High School is going to go to a pure competency-based grading system. We will be tarred and feathered. It's not something that is going to be well received. So, the answer is going to be what other high schools have done. They run a dual system. Competency-based education is required by New Hampshire law. That piece is a requirement. The grading system and having conversations about grading system, that's all optional. Mm-hmm. And so what Suzanne is trying to do is simply have a conversation about grading systems, not go 4 years out and say this is going to be the grading system, but to talk about the relationship between grading and competency-based education. At the end of 5 years, we will have some kind of, most likely, hybrid, because quite frankly, that's what most high schools end up doing. And the reason they do it that way is because people want to hang on to the tradition of a traditional grading system. And yet at the same time, we're required to do a competency-based model by state statute. So I think what the messaging that's going out is somehow the board is going to take action on a grading system, in some cases tomorrow, next year, next week. And clearly this strategic plan, as you read it, at least for the first 4 years, it's conversation, 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 gathering information, gathering information, gathering information, including not just our faculty and staff, but also the parental community. So that's 4 years of that work. After the 5th year, it's really just, okay, so we have all of this information, what do we want to do with it? And ultimately, that's what the 5th year is about. It's a decision-making year. And at that point, administration would have recommendation for the board's consideration based on the input from faculty and the community. So that's really where we're headed.
Right. So I think that's very valid, and I think the key thing too is perception. again, in what the community sees as direction. And I think part of the confusion, if you look at what's listed in 2019, 2020, and then 2020, 21, in black type, it talks about education. And in blue type, it starts talking about grading.
Yeah.
And then as we get further along, they get smushed together. And really, it seems like the black one should actually continue, and maybe what was crossed out for the top of 2022, 2023, that becomes the 2021, 2022 regarding education, which is examine and refine the competency-based education and implementation, which we're moving forward with.
Right.
The bottom part where we talk about grading, so you've got the blue, which makes sense, you've got the blue that you make sense. In the 2021-22, it all makes sense. And then really what happens is then so I would say engage community in conversations regarding the possibility of CBE grading. And administration makes the recommendation. And then what I would put in the blue part for 2022-2023 is board discusses grading options for the high school and finalizes a plan or something along that line.
In 23, 24?
Yeah, I could see us doing that in 2022, 2023. I mean, it moves logically. If we're going to start talking about grading with the community, that first one, we're going to further do it in the second year. We're going to do it in the third year. I think, you're beating a dead horse.
Well, I think that I think the conversation is a multi-year conversation, Kenny. Right. And even if it says the same thing in 2 years in a row, it's because it's a heavy-duty conversation.
I think it's great. Right.
Yeah,
so it's not until the fourth year
exactly
that we because you're going to give us the administration's going to give us a recommendation in the third year, which I think is perfect, because that gives 3 years of community input and administration time to digest all of that, us to digest all of it, and then in the fourth year, that's when we move to trying to start making a decision on where we're heading.
So what if we just, looking at 22, 23, if we just left it at, the board will have a discussion regarding the high school grading and reporting systems, and just leave it at that.
Okay.
And don't say anything else, just say that we'll have that discussion and determine future implementation or something.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Can we take a step back and look at what the 5-year outcome is that we're trying to get to? Kenny, you suggested at the beginning of this conversation eliminating that, what's there right now. So what do we have instead if we're eliminating the 5-year outcome that's here right now? That's the way, right. I mean, I've always built this trip plan is you start with where you're trying to get to and then you figure out how you want to get there.
The 5-year is that we considered different options and have implemented one, but I don't think we know what we want to implement now, because I think I agree with some of the public sentiment. We implemented something, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't think we've really tested to see if it's having the desired impact. And so I don't think we know where we're going to be in 5 years. I think we need to study it. And so the outcome, instead of a definitive, we're going to fully implement CBE with CBE grading, is we're going to come up with what we think is the most appropriate model for grading. And it might be a dual thing if you get a competency, but you also get a numerical grade.
Can I just, on the 2023, 2024, in the blue it says examine and refine competency-based education, which was the educational part, and then the next thing it says is possible implementation of high school grading system. How about that? Does that cover everything? Because it's like, well, we've had 3 years getting there. You're making your recommendation in 2022, 23. We're reflecting on the competency-based competency grading system. And in 2023, 24, we're going to really talk about should we implement it. So we're refining with the competency work that we've already done, but we're just adding the piece where now that we've come up with some system, let's talk about real implementation.
So I'll go back to Michael's question, because one of the things, and I think that's a great idea, Al, one of the things that we forced ourselves into which I think was the right thing to do, and actually Michael was the one that motivated it, was to end these 5-year outcomes in a student, what do students gain from this? But if you look at this particular one, it's really, as you go through this, it's not about the students at all. It's about the community, the community, the community, the community. So the outcome should reflect the 4 years before that, and it's really not about what their students will have a greater understanding of. It's about what the community will have a greater understanding of. I think that this whole stream is about engaging the community, not necessarily having our students have a better understanding. And that would be the one exception to all of the work we've done, because every single part of the strategic plan is about where we want the students to be. But this, if you read through this, the students are not part of this stream. It's about the greater community. I don't know, Michael, what's your reaction to that?
Well, if we put it in that context, does it even need to be here?
You take it out completely?
Yeah.
But then how do you, I mean, I think it's important to be here because you're telegraphing to the community you're having a conversation and they will be engaged in it. And I think the community is fearful that we'll have the conversation and they won't be engaged in it. And here the board is saying, absolutely, you'll be engaged in it.
If you would like, I can go back and work on creating the student language with these pieces, individual pieces that you've discussed to add some of the things that you're highlighting. I don't mind reworking it. I don't know how much.
I don't want to complicate things too much by adding a student strand through all of this, because I feel like we're struggling as it is.
Yeah.
So I think adding in, like if we added a student strand for all 5 years, I think that would just make it even more complicated. If that, what is that, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're suggesting.
Well, the 5-year outcome goal is really to have students have a greater understanding of their depth of knowledge and how their knowledge is applicable as they move through their secondary aspirations. So it's really about and this is why the faculty is doing so much work around this right now, and this is why it's really difficult to go 5 years out, because a lot of, I mean, the faculty are diving deeply into this as we speak, and so it's difficult to know exactly where they're going to be, where they're going to be in a few years. But a lot of competency education is really getting kids. It's an element of transparency of learning. So it's not about secrecy in learning and kids guessing why they're getting why they're earning certain grades that they are and all of that. It's all about transparency of learning and having it for parents and for kids, and understanding where they are. So when I look at this, yes, the grade is the external report method to what the kids are gaining. And so when I look at the 5-year outcome, it's very student-based because it's all about the learning for the kids and what the kids, how they understand their learning and their depth of knowledge as they move through their high school experience and move on.
So when on the issue of community, when I read community, and I think it could be clarified, but I don't assume that doesn't include the students. Because if you look at the process by which we decided to pursue a new middle school, we had tremendous student engagement, focus groups, surveys, all sorts of things. So I would say maybe it's worth clarifying that community means the students.
Well,
but I don't see them as separate groups.
I think you're onto something, and Denise is as well, because I think she was trying to say the same thing, Dan. I think if you say, when I looked down, I did not see students, and I'm the superintendent. What I saw was community, and community to me means the parent community. So I would say that if you want to have that outcome, and you really wouldn't have to change it if you simply said engage the community and the students in, and the students in, and the students in, then the outcome makes sense. Without that, the outcome doesn't make sense. I think you do have to clarify when you're talking about the community, you're also talking about high school students who are very capable, as we saw tonight, of being engaged in very rich and very deep conversations.
So the other piece I'm struck that is missing is framing the broader context of where this work originates is the state requirement. And that it's not simply a matter of meeting a state minimum standard, but there's a motivating factor to become compliant, and becoming compliant should be...
Well, we're compliant now. We've done the work to be compliant to the state law. I want to be really super clear that the state law does not articulate a CBE grading process.
Right.
So this isn't being driven by, this part of it isn't being driven by straight state law. It's being driven by whether the grading system and our competency-based expectations are in line.
But for the understanding for the community, how we've come to this point, what's brought us here, that state requirement is a piece of it. Despite the fact that we've already met it, it's how we've gotten to this point. I think that's been lost to a degree.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm still really concerned about the wording of saying fully implement. I think we have to get rid of fully implement, because in the community of parents, there is already so much interpretation of that as being CBE grading. So I really, really think we have to get rid of fully implement, and so that we are clear that we're not talking about grading. We may or may not go in that direction, we don't know, but I just really feel if we keep it as fully implement CBE, the parent community, which we've already heard plenty of, is assuming they already know where they're going. They've already decided this is the grading process. And I think we need to be clearer, because this is a strategic plan, in what it is that we're actually going to have 5 years from now. Yes, we'll have competency-based education, but we need to make that clearer, and using the words fully implement just clouds it.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that the goal here isn't necessarily grading at all. It's a tool set for students to understand how much they learn.
Exactly.
A grade is one tool that is used, and so we have to look at how we assess students.
I may be an outlier here, and I realize that I'm on one end of the competency-based evaluation experience so far, and in the grades don't matter, quote unquote, end of the spectrum in my personal experience. I like what I see in competency-based report card, because it tells me more about what has been covered and what my kid has learned than distilling that all down to a single letter grade. And so, and this is not incompatible with what Denise is saying, but are we really talking about trying to get to a single letter grade, or is there something else here that we need to describe more generally, or a different tool set that we're talking about to get there? What do you really want out of this, I guess, is we're not just trying to figure out how to get
The faculty they are currently looking at assessment practices, and if our assessment practices and our grading practices are help students understand and parents understand what they've learned, where they need to grow, how they're going to, what the skills are that they need to be explored, it's what they know and what they can do. And so we, as professionals in the field of education, it is our duty to ask ourselves continuously, are we doing the best that we possibly can do? Are we doing what is in the best interest of our students? And are we helping kids get to the next level? And I find that to be a very big part of what our job is, whether it's with curriculum instruction, assessment, whatever it is. And so we've done it with the curriculum, and we continue to do it with the curriculum. It'll never end. But we need to start asking those questions around how we assess student knowledge. And so that's what this is focused on, is are we meeting the needs of our kids with the way we assess and grade?
So it's not just the letter grade at the end of, or whatever it is.
Correct.
It's much broader than that.
Correct.
I don't know what we're gonna, I don't know who we go
I
with
have
it.
one more, I have
I
one more
really, I
suggestion.
really almost think we could go on this forever tonight.
Yeah.
I think,
I have a quick suggestion, though. Can I just have a quick suggestion? So what if we just took out these little words? So we kept it by June of 2024, students will have a greater understanding and depth of their learning to support post-secondary aspirations, and just take out through fully implement CBE. Just take that phrase out, so they'll just have a greater understanding and depth of their learning to support post-secondary aspirations.
So you're in 2023, 2024, you're just taking out fully implement.
We'll take that out of in 2023 and 2024, and then in the 5-year outcome, taking out through a fully implemented CBE. So we're keeping the rest of it. Out of the 5-year outcome, it's by June of 2024, students will have a greater understanding and depth of their learning to support post-secondary aspirations.
I would keep CBE though, because they're learning about the whole crux of it is you're using CBE to understand your learning. So I think you keep that. Just we're hung up on a final letter grade, which is actually the smallest part of competency-based learning. By the time you've reached a letter grade, it's kind of too late. The whole point of it is during the process, you're able to catch it before you're at there. And that's the beauty of it. It's like with a 70 or a 60 or an A or a B, when you're like at a third of the quarter or a half of a quarter, how does that help you, or as a parent, do I figure out what's going wrong and how do I fix it before it's a crisis? When you get to the end of the quarter, it's a crisis. So the whole beauty of the system is allowing us to clearly define what the problem is and fix it in a timely manner before it's a big crisis. So we're hung up on this. I think the 2023-2024, just stick with examine and refine competency-based education and implementation. Perfect. And then by June 2024, students will have greater understanding and depth of their learning through competency-based education to support post-secondary aspirations. I think does that sum up what we're trying to do?
Yes.
Right, get rid of
So
fully.
don't change the 5-year outcome because it has nothing to do with grading. It
Just
has to
take
do
out,
with
all you gotta do
CBE.
is take
Take
out
out word
fully
fully,
implemented
right.
CBE out of
Right, that's what I was trying to say.
2023-24, and then out of the 5-year outcome, all you're doing is you're taking out fully implement. So you just the fully implement, as Denise is saying. Does that meet what you're saying, Denise?
Yeah, basically take out fully implement, yes.
I think none of the problem was with competency-based learning and education and having those goals and working towards that. The problem was the assumption that we're also going to have a grading system
Right.
that aligned with
Right.
it. And I think removing that and leaving that up for discussion as we involve the community and hear what the community wants is the way forward.
Is that acceptable to people? Do you have that change? I don't have it.
I got it.
You have it now?
I got it.
It's been changed like,
It's a pretty small change.
It turns out to be a very small change.
after all the discussion,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Are we acceptable with that?
Yes.
Okay. Other changes, I'll just throw in other changes. I had one that I think is pretty self-evident. In
Which
the foreign
section?
language. Oh, he says hopefully.
Guys, in which section? Still high school?
This is DW, the district world language.
Yeah.
We kind of stopped it after 2 years because of, depending on how we're going to go forward. So we stopped, didn't have any outcomes, but then we still kept all the action strategies. So I think
Eliminate action strategies.
we should not have those,
Correct.
right? I mean, if we don't have a goal, we should have an action strategy for something we're looking at.
What are the action strategies?
They're the one-pagers. I've got it, Laura. They're the one-pages that support the goal. And Tom's absolutely right. We eliminated the goal.
I mean, if
but
you
we
don't have a
didn't-
goal, you should have an action strategy if you don't have a goal.
Right.
And I had one other little one in the opening statement. There's a final sentence that has something like Kenny says this should be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
That should be there. I hate to read you out of the document, Kenny, but I don't.
No, I was wondering what that was.
Okay.
Giving you attribution.
Are there other?
So One other thing, and I don't know if this is important to do or not, but still on competency-based, and it's part of the middle school, and certainly going ahead with the kind of competency-based education. But should it be part of the strategic plan, and I don't know if 2019, 2020, because we're going to be looking at the grading in the high school, is it important to set up something where we're going to be evaluating how that grading has worked out in the middle school as well?
Yes.
Because I think that's a part of that.
But, and to that whole point, it's like, I know it's like down, but when we get to the preliminary discussion of communication, I actually kind of address it.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so I don't have the middle school hard copy, so the middle school do an evaluation of the current grading system.
I'm sorry. And
Got it, Ken.
again, like, coming up to be in the
Just to kind of stick that in.
Yeah.
Right.
Is this done in anger?
Are there others? So with those changes, are we all ready to vote? Approve it as second read?
I'm not really happy with where we landed on the high school CBE. I guess my sense is that there's been a lot of good discussion tonight, and I still don't think it really reflects exactly what we're trying to get to, and I would like to ask.
Would you want to pull that one thing and then come back?
Yes, I was going to suggest that we ask Sue and Jim to take one more
crack at
one more pass at.
So would it be okay to pass everything else but that ban?
Sure.
Okay, so we need a motion with the exception of high school CBE.
Okay. So motion to approve the strategic plan without that. Unless people think we,
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, we've approved all but that strand of it.
Thank you.
Okay, the master schedule, I don't think we need, does people have comments on that? First.
Any chance we could move the July meeting one week, one direction or the other?
Where is it?
If you move it one direction or the other, could you move it earlier? Because I've already scheduled the week after.
Hold on, let me look at, because I wasn't,
Like scheduled airplanes and all of that, so.
yeah,
You are, same week?
where is it?
No, if you move it early,
While people are looking, Jim, did you run this through kind of the, we had been talking about being respectful of different religions and their holidays. Did we run this through and make sure it's not, I didn't look.
Well, truthfully, no. I think it would be hard for us to run a calendar through that whole, because it's not just the major religions, there are minor religions as well. So part of the tool that I've been using is informing staff when the major holy days come up and letting them be aware of the sensitivity to that issue rather than building into the calendar. Because when I met with the multi-religion group, interfaith group, I just realized that trying to build it into the calendar was going to be impossible because there were so many different religions, and so I've just been trying to keep staff abreast of what's coming up, like Ramadan. I sent out a notice on Ramadan, that kind of thing. Okay.
So when talking about July, what is
that
it
would
that
be
you
great.
want to change?
Can we do the 10th instead of the 18th if that's what we're trying to do?
Yeah, July 10th.
I will absolutely not be here the 17th. So.
Okay.
Right, we're trying to get it off the 17th, right?
Yeah, can you do the 10th?
Yeah.
All right, the 10th does work, that's okay.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to find that now.
Al and I think Michael also have moved to the preliminary discussion of a communications goal. Al sent out a statement about where he thinks we should go. And I'm wondering whether it would be agreeable to the board if Al and Michael, because Michael's also written on this topic, would frame a goal with some benchmarks of what a communication goal might look like and bring that back to us. because I think this has been roiling for so long. I think it's time to take a real serious look at it and what we might do and have some benchmarks to really become better at this. So how would people feel about that?
I'm okay with that.
What?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I can't underscore the urgency of this.
Yeah. I mean, I think actually, because I don't want to go long, but I think that I wrote this trying to think through what I've heard from the community before I came to this meeting, and I think everything I've heard from the underscores exactly what I was saying and what I wrote is backed up. So it's just a matter of the goal of us kind of tightening it up, I think.
So if you would work together to bring that
Can I be part of that?
Sure, please.
Okay.
So I can at least bring some sense of what actually and how it impacts the system.
So I just think it's worth saying, I think one of the advantages of doing this is that the time of the individuals who work for the district, I know can be better managed. Their efforts can be better managed in a more efficient way. That's one of my big hopes that will come out of this. And then thank you to you both for sort of articulating, your observations and your vision, because I think it's gotten us off to a good start. And I like a lot of what I've read and what you've both put down. So I think one of the goals that I hope to see out of this is that, the work of Jim and Todd and others is channeled more efficiently and perhaps more directly. So.
Okay, so I think in terms of like a time, what about not the next meeting, but the meeting after that? Does that sound reasonable?
It's really dependent on the three of us getting together.
Okay.
And I think probably in terms of work commitments, Michael's is the most demanding because obviously I'm working for you, so I'll make time.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to give us some guidance, Michael, in terms of, not tonight, but as you look at your calendar.
Sure. Yeah, I think we could probably figure out a way to get it done by June 5th. The biggest concern, I guess my biggest concern is, at least part of my concern about communication is how we're talking about the middle school project and the lack of what I perceive as a lack of a cohesive approach to that. And that is that we're a significant percentage of the time left between now and March 2020 will be gone by a month from now.
Okay.
So there's not time to waste.
Okay, so next meeting?
I think we can work on it. I don't think it's going to take, I honestly don't think it'll take us that long.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to ratify for the ORAA, which is the administrators agreement, which is not a union, but it's kind of an organization, it's like the collective of the administrators. There were some, we approved all the salaries, but there were some other agreements that were part of that. So my understanding is we have to approve that as well, Dr. Morse, is that correct?
Yes, if you guys don't mind, we actually had this on the agenda a while ago, and then it was one of those nights where it was running long, and here we are again running long. But relatively minor additions to their contracts. We updated their medical information and percentages, meaning that we lowered the district's commitment to 85.5%, and the employees would pay 14.5%. That was part of the financial discussion we had earlier. We added $500 per year to their annuities. We created a sick bank, which is consistent with all the other units, and then we added language related to them being able to have bereavement leave, which all the other units have as well. And we updated the appendix with the correct positions and salary information. So it's all conversations we've had. We just never had a final, like, we've blessed this, and it's now officially part of their employment contract. So we just need a motion to approve.
Brian?
Motion to approve the ORIA contract.
Moved by Brian, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Denise?
Yep.
Questions?
I'm going to abstain because I haven't had a chance to look through it.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 6 in favor and 1 abstention. Right. We have 3 nominations. What? I'm sorry? Dr. Morse, you want to talk about these? Or?
Yep. So we are now closing in on actual hiring. All the principals and Catherine have been involved in advertising, screening, and interviewing with teams. So tonight I'd like to nominate Vivian Jablowski for the mathematics position. As an aside, Michael and I got into this conversation. Vivian's from Colorado, so the School Spring advertisement brought in some West Coast candidates that we've never seen before. That was kind of cool. And Suzanne was involved in remote video conferencing in order to do the interview with her. So she's pretty excited that we're bringing Vivian on. Nicole Casimiro for special education teacher. Nicole has been a para in the system for 5 years and is ready to step into a teaching position. So we're excited by her candidacy tonight. And Joanna House is a world language and Spanish position, and she'll be covering Leslie's sabbatical. And at the elementary level, we're fortunate to do an in-house promotion of Brian Ryan, who has served the students of the high school for, I believe, around 17 years now. And he was interested in being the assistant director at the elementary school between Massway and Moheramet. So I nominate all of those candidates to you this evening.
Just wondering if you have a motion to approve this as a block.
I motion to approve the nominations as a block.
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Second by Brian. Discussion? Emily?
Does Brian have any experience at the elementary level?
You know, I don't think he does have direct experience at the elementary, but his answers were dead on in terms of how to support elementary students. I have every confidence he'll be successful at the elementary level, Michael.
Other questions? All those in favor, please raise your hands. 6 in favor, all those opposed? Abstentions? 1 abstention, Michael abstains. We have to approve the activity stipends.
Make a motion to approve the West River Middle School activity stipend.
Moved by Al, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Denise. Discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, those are approved. We have several policies. Denise, you want to talk about those?
Yes, so the policy for first grade, EHAB, it has been gone through, as is typical, it's a new policy, and it's been gone through by Josh and the lawyers, and we were basically asked to accept it as presented and not make changes to it.
Right.
It's a required.
And it's a required, right.
Right, so it's stipulated exactly what it has to say. We have to do it.
So I'll make a motion to approve policy EHAB for first read.
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Second by Brian. All in favor?
Oh, wait,
Discussion?
I just realized
You can
something.
withdraw, or?
Well, it's just, I realized that it's actually for first and second read. We were, it's
No,
for
it's
first
just
read.
first
Oh,
read.
it's for first read, okay. I thought we were, so, okay, no,
So
sorry.
are you going to do them separately then, or?
Yeah, I'll do EHAB first, I
Okay.
guess, for first read.
Ready to vote? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, that's approved as for first read.
All right. And now I will make a motion for second read to approve policy EEAG, use of private vehicles to transport students, JICC, student conduct on school buses, and JFCB, care of school property by students.
Those three policies are moved for second read. Is there a second? Brian? Questions? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor. Those approved. Those are approved. Committee reports? Al?
Technology committee met, Schoolology and the thing were already done. There was a report by Sue Ballard, who's a library specialist, analyzing our library systems. There's a report. Todd can share it electronically with the board. You can read it.
Denise?
Manifest committee met and approved the manifest.
And I guess in policy committee too, we're working through, looking again at the facilities use and making sure that issues are taken care of in that policy.
That's good catch.
Okay, is there public comment?
My daughter is.
Better tell your wife about that.
It was going to be boring. My daughter is a couple of weeks back from China, and she went to a meeting about going to Africa tonight. So she's pretty excited about going to Tanzania, and I just wanted to thank the district for all the great opportunities. Now I'm going to go home and explain to my wife about my daughter.
You can do that verbatim in a minute, right?
Can I make a quick comment? Anita Mather, I'm going to put on my hat of the Oyster River Alumni Association. I'd like to announce that we're having our 11th annual Bobcat Bolt 5K and Kids Fun Run coming up June 15th. And we're offering a special $20 student rate for students in the district, and we're also going to extend that to faculty and staff, because I hear you're doing a 100-mile challenge. So we're going to extend that rate to faculty and staff would like to join us. It's a great time, so I hope you all come out. It's in memory of two brothers, Josh and Nate Hardy. So hope to see you all there. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. So we need a motion to go into a non-public session.
Just before we do that, Tom, I was going through my reports for tonight, and I realized I skipped over. We have 30 different faucets at the middle school. All of them have to be checked in terms of potential lead contamination. 3 of them came back with lead contamination, and those faucets are all in classrooms. Those pipes will be shut down, so they won't be able to be used. The other 27 in the kitchen, the drinking fountains and so forth, all passed. We'll post this and send this out to the parents tomorrow, because by law we have to post it. By law we have to let the parents know that we found lead in these 3 particular locations, which are not drinking locations, and the water will be shut down to those rooms.
Another argument for a new school.
Another argument for a new school.
Will you be sharing with the staff and students which locations those are?
Yeah, they will no longer have water going to them, but yes. Yeah, everybody gets to know, because that's the state law. But there would be no students being able to get water out of them as of tonight. They're shut down.
Well, last night, I mean.
We just learned today, this afternoon.
So we're gonna be sharing exactly which locations those were, exactly
Yes.
which classrooms.
Yeah, that's all part of the requirement.
So we need a motion to go into non-public session for the discussion of student matters. So Kenny, do you want to?
Sure. So it's New Hampshire State Law RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, and it would be C, matters which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person. So I move we go into non-public based on that.
Moved by Kenny, second by Denise. Roll call.
Dan Klein, yes.
Michael Williams, yes.
Kenny Wagner, yes.
Denise Day, yes.
Tom Newkirk, yes.
Al Holland, yes.
Brian Cisneros, yes.